Guys, I think that we have to actually say this. This is a very stunning, a very brave decision. But I think at the end of the day, Stefan Amaris did nothing wrong when he destroyed Venus by making a giant death weapon. Hello there, everyone, and welcome to part two of a lore ramblings where we're actually talking about the liberation of Terra proper. The name's Adam.
And I'm Tech Priest.
And I'm
And what
Imsit. Imsit,
and,
sorry.
and with us today we have this book, which we have been hyping up for the last week, and it also has some of the better art, at least in my opinion, for when it comes to just crazy shit.
Well, you don't like the '80s BattleTech art?
No, there is some of the classic '80s BattleTech art in this. Also, some of the classic '90s BattleTech art in this.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Uh,
classics that are in this. I did a very quick skim through. There's also even more ship combat. So if you have all of the cluster C personality disorders and you want to go full on in-depth space battles of Battletech, which is the most clunky and long-running series of it, this is the book for you. Welcome to the Historical Liberation of Terra, Part 2. You got a mech walking into the line of laser or plasma fire. I don't know what type of weapon that is, but they're going through it.
uh, that is
What?
laser
Well,
fire.
isn't green usually small laser?
No, green, at least video game wise, green is usually medium laser. The humble medium laser, the most point and tonnage efficient weapon in the game. Uh, to the point where there is an entire variant of the Hunchback whose entire weaponry is basically just fuck you, have medium laser.
The best
Oh no,
part about this is I feel like the mech isn't going to return fire. I think it's just going to walk over and punch it with its stump, with its cannon stump.
Yeah, that's an Orion, by the way.
oh
It
yeah,
is
those
also
things.
Kerensky's Orion. You can see his name stenciled in underneath the viewports at the top there.
Ah.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about this particular Orion, I don't know if they covered in this, is that Kerensky's was actually outfitted as a prototype model. He preferred using an Orion, interestingly enough, over most other battle mechs, partially because the Orion is very heavily armored for a battle mech, but also because it's slightly less conspicuous than, say, an assault mech, which is what most commanders would be using. That said, he still was nearly killed several times in his Orion. People forget about this, but Kerensky did in fact perform very well as a mech warrior. That's actually how he started making his name out of the naval ring. Was that he saw action during the Davian Civil War, the one of the Hidden Wars, and then kind of rolled up from there.
You
One of
know,
my better
sorry.
anyway, the one of the better pieces of art in the book comes right after the talk about the introduction with the introductory fiction, which is kind of interesting.
Before we do, I will make a comment because with BattleTech, inevitably Adam will talk about Gundam because Biggie ain't here to do it. There is actually a Xeon Ace whose whole gimmick is he does not have an Ace custom color. He has designed his mech to basically be as generic as possible. He also arguably has the highest kill count in the war. It's to the point where it's. I think he actually has made comments. Some of his kills probably aren't even him. They're just misattributed to him because he does not change his custom ace mech, which is just a higher performing model. Kransky kind of has that energy to it because of that. And by the way, hello there, Aka Okuno, and hello there, Coyote. The End Times, which that just brings massive war flashbacks to anyone who enjoyed Warhammer Fantasy. Mmm.
Yeah, yeah. This is the 2077 is the start because the fight for Terra would actually take years because the planet was a fortress at this point. Uh, and also that there were only certain areas they could land. We'll get into it, which actually comes into some of the more funny campaigns, including the March to the Sea in Australia.
Which, if you're wondering, yes, this book. There's a reason I have joked in the description, which also is where you can get a copy of it from Catalyst Labs. Feel free to get a copy. It is very dense with minutiae.
It is, and it's the wonderful kind of autism where it's like they go, here's your units, and you can cross-reference it with other books in case you want to run like unit versus unit special rule battles sometimes, which is really kind of fun.
The kind of autism that makes me kind of concerned about joining a game like Bolt Action.
By the way, here's a lovely piece of art of this guy either about to be executed.
Shot. Unironically, he is about to be probably shot.
I'm pretty sure this is to reference the first fiction, which is about one of the was it the Green Haven
the
Gestapo,
Greenhaven Gestapo
getting arrested by Catholics. Because if you remember, these guys killed the Pope.
Yeah, so the Inquisition, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Literally, the fucking Inquisition. They found
how
him,
has this
and
book
they
compared?
shoot him in the head.
So Jim is asking, how does this compare to Operation Klondike? I like this one a lot better. Some of it is just due to plain bias. I legit just fucking hate the clans. That is legitimately one of the problems. The other is, whenever the clans are described in that book, the way they win feels like horrible writing. Like, there's not really cleverness to their victories. It's more of a they win in spite of their quality.
Yeah.
And the one that always comes to mind, because I reference it all the damn time, nearly losing to Space Afghanistan, which had no mechs. I don't even think they had armored vehicles, or if they did, it was just agrarian vehicles they retrofitted into armor and relatively basic weaponry.
Well, how do you think they took the Star League? Through jihad.
Now, if you told me, unironically, if you told me that what happened is that those Space Afghanistani actually eventually started leading the clanners on that planet, I'd believe you. They're too stupid to run things themselves.
Lisa and Al Kerensky.
But no, straight up, Operation Klondike. It's not the actual scenario that's bad. It's legitimately just how it was written, because it was written during the HeroClix push era, if I recall.
Yeah,
No, wasn't that Dark Age?
Catalyst was. This is written sort of during that time when Catalyst has licensing but not full rights, and WizKids kind of holds the license but not.
Yeah, Operation Klondike
really
was written around the time of WizKids still owning the license, and I think that's part of why it was so bad.
Yeah, Tops is still owning it. It's kind of an interesting saga because again, a lot of people argue that Catalyst has fallen off, and I would argue that Catalyst has always been kind of terrible. But
it's just squatting on an IP.
Better.
It's just squatting on IP and legacy, yeah.
It's still better than the WizKids era of writing. Like, hello, yes, we were going to have a jihad and never talk about it.
Whoops.
And then, whoops. The Dark Ages books, which are, I know some people like them. I personally am like, this is some of the dumbest shit I've ever read.
I mean, I was screaming on one of the Dark Age books, so that should tell you something.
Wait, you actually like read them? I'm actually shocked.
No, I haven't. Oh, I thought you meant the Operation Klondike, because I was screaming at that.
No. Dark Age is, I think that's what it is. The Age of Sigmar of Battletech. It's where they try to reset everything.
No, that's an insult to Age of Sigmar. I'm gonna be real with you.
It did give us the Republic of the Sphere, which I know people are gonna shit on me for this, but I think the Republic of the Sphere is an interesting concept of like a reborn Terran hegemony,
which they don't do
falling
anything
into
with.
the same traps as they did.
Well, they did lead over an era of peace.
And also their paint schemes are really good. But otherwise, I can understand why people didn't like them.
But no, like even though I shit on Age of Sigmar, I still prefer it over that. I mean, I think I like it over Clan Wolf OCs winning over a planet, winning over Terra. I think that's pretty fucking stupid.
That fight is a three-way brawl between them and Jade Falcon and the Republic of the Sphere.
That's pretty fucking stupid.
Yeah, they're basically.
I think that's actually dumber
for Terra. The Republic is actually just fighting a desperate action to try to save the planet, while the two clanner forces are both fighting them and each other. So it's.
I mean, that's brain damage.
Yeah, it also took place in a lot of it in Canada for whatever reason. Anyway,
actually, speaking of that, fun fact: do you know where the Amaris Palace is located?
Canada, the home of all evil.
No. Specifically, Lake Louise, which is in Alberta, Canada.
Dun,
No, that
dun,
makes sense. That
dun.
actually makes perfect sense in my opinion.
Alberta is truly the home of the worst of mankind.
It's home to the most uneducated people that I have ever met. I have known Albertans that actually can't even spell on a 5th grade level, as in they can't even read a newspaper because they are that illiterate. I have known them to be incapable of doing basic addition and subtractions, and no, they were not on the influence of drugs, nor were they intellectually disabled beyond the standard Albertan ratio. They are single-handedly the Roman description upon the Britons, describing them as creatures that lodge in the swamps and have no signs of intelligent life, applies perfectly to the Albertans. The only thing that you'd have to add is you have to include that they own 50 to 100 guns.
Anyway, we just lost our 3 listeners from Alberta.
Oh no, we'll say we respect their firearms.
No, I ain't crapping on them for the firearms. I'm just pointing out that every time I've met an Albertan, they're dumb as pigs.
Like, hey, they're dumb as shit, and they're like, hey, do you want to see my collection of firearms?
One of them was also a very huge Imperial Guard fanboy of 40K.
Oh god.
like he loved the commissariat corps too.
Oh no.
Oh, and you see, I have these guys
God.
with pickle. I like the Death Corps of Krieg.
Oh,
No, you say that, but that was one of his favorite legions.
Oh no!
Oh no.
Why did he like them? Did he like them because they evoke a fondness for a certain era?
Because of their Kaiserliche standards,
Oh,
they looked like World
no.
War I German infantry.
Okay, at least okay.
Oh,
He
At least
also
they
liked
look
the
more
Armageddon
like
Steel Legion too because of that similar vibe with
Okay,
the
so
Stalins.
he's
He
just
was
a
a
fan of
Varibu.
World War One. Okay, that's better than the usual stereotype of a Krieg fan, which is they're a fan of World War Two.
No, he was
I like
both
Krieg
he was a
because-
Varibu, yes, but he was also a Kaiserbu, so you know.
Oh no. I like Krieg more because it's kind of this dark humor to it. Of it's a planet known, like literally, it's a planet named fucking War that sends a bunch of people to die in pointless wars,
Oh,
and
oh
they
no,
are enthusiastic about it. Like
my,
that's just
yeah, no. My favorite thing is that for the commissars that are assigned to them, they are supposed to prevent the guardsmen from maintaining their morale and going on suicidal charges.
Yeah,
basically their job is to try to keep them from doing martyrdom activities.
yeah.
There's also some really good Krieg short fiction that was written, including one about a Krieger that sort of semi-deserted. Like he was left for dead and kind of just didn't get recovered. Uh, and he just rejoins the Imperial military because during the cleanup operations that he was part of, one of the people that he was getting to know died in a cave-in, and like the thing that they were talking about a lot together was like forgiveness and the nature of that sort of thing about like what does it matter to the emperor or life kind of feeling. So literally his entire thing was like, I was supposed to die, so I'm actually going to go out and do that because that was what my fate was, and so on, which is, it's dark, but it kind of fits, like this grim fatalism. It's kind of,
I mean, that's Krieg in a nutshell.
yeah.
Again, this was just one of a couple. I've known at least a couple of other Albertans that were not quite to that specific amazing degree. But
We
after you've met 2 or 3 of the of a similar, not inclination, like they were different politics. It's just the same level of for some fucking reason they were not the brightest boys in the bunch.
we do have to say to Journey, we are not including your family.
Yeah, we weren't really including Jim's family here. It was just a weird kind of confluence. I knew 3 different Albertans, and all 3 of them were not very bright.
Really digging the hole
It's
deeper.
similar. It's similar to how, unfortunately, if you're named Kevin, you're now associated with being brain dead. It's just
God.
kind of a scenario for me.
All right.
But
All right,
anyway, yeah,
so-
like being in Alberta, Stefan Amaris probably did that more to steal all of the guns, let's be fair, so that he can arm the rest of Earth to be a death fortress.
You know what? That
Mhm.
makes sense.
Let's be fair, that's probably why he actually did it. Also, the opening story, Hard Justice, very fucking great. the Catholics barge in on him for murdering the Pope, and they're just going to not show. The Lord may show you mercy, but we
they're-
won't.
Well, it says,
Yeah.
by the authority vested in me by the Curia and His Holiness, I excommunicate you and condemn you to eternal purgatory.
Yeah.
And because
Jesus
of what you did to
Christ.
Pope Clement, I'll help you on your way.
Yeah.
One of the things I like about this is they do talk a little bit about like the other.
The other...
The other ones are actually kind of decent, where they're talking about like the
Artillery duel. That's one thing they do. What's going on in London? The
what's going on
fat
in
man was
London.
no longer jolly. Instead, he was a murderer and usurper.
Yeah,
Well, that might be another reason he's in Albert. He wants to get as close as he can to becoming Santa. Except instead of sending stuff for gifts for Christmas, he's bombing everybody.
No, he's following the protocols for Santa. It's Robo Santa from Futurama. That's the version he's familiar with, because they're after the Great Christmas War, in between this great Star Trek and the Star Trek Wars.
I do like this line from the introduction section of saying, while others have linked the cataclysmic events of the past 300 years to the American Civil War, and gone to blame the terrible conflicts of the Unification War, which in turn resulted from the Age of War, the Second Soviet Civil War, World Wars and the Holy Wars, Jewish 30 pieces, and even the exodus of the 12 tribes, similar to that a single element linked each of these terrible times: humankind.
Yeah.
Decent line from a guy that is the himbo of Battletech, Victor Steiner Davian. Also the manlet of Battletech, noted for being very short.
Also, hold on one second. Why is he saying that the Exodus is a terrible thing?
I don't know.
That was good! That was good!
It's been a few thousand years, and he was raised in space Germany, okay?
Oh, no. No, he was born... No, this Steiner Davian, well, he lives on Terra.
No, he lives on Terra now, but you do know that he was being raised to be both First Prince and Archon, right?
Oh, no.
So yeah.
There's why. Also, he could be arguing from the point of view of technically they had to repay the Egyptians the price of being essentially getting rid of their property.
Yeah, like there's a lot.
They
of
never
shit
paid
there.
the Egyptians back.
Don't pay the debts.
Then again, there's that weird part in Battletech lore where apparently a lot of Jews ended up converting to Christianity because of, I think, something that happened in Israel. I don't know how. I don't know why that would make any sense.
But it's Battletech. It's early 80s Battletech lore. It's a little bit wonky.
Well, I mean, they were inspired by Dune, which did a lot of that. Frank Herbert did a lot of religious fusions in Dune, and I think that's a bit of a nod to that. What would have made more sense is a new religious movement where a branch of Judaism actually thought they found another Messiah, like they had their belief on the Messiah, and they thought it happened during that time. I think that would have made more sense.
There's actually several groups in Battletech that are like that. There's the Azami movement of Islam, for example, that basically said, like, okay, we got a sort of a new revelation. We need to go out into the stars and do this. They actually control a decent amount of territory within the Draconis Combine. And the Combine kind of lets them do their own thing in exchange for supplying them with troops, which is where the Arcab legions come from.
Yeah, but oh no, that means the Lubavitch are still around.
Yes.
They're now digging tunnels in space.
Digging tunnels in space time.
No, they're digging tunnels into the hyperspace control systems. Comstar has to dig them out like cockroaches in a computer.
Comstar versus Jews.
Comstar versus the Tunnel Jews is like, there's a terrible movie title.
No, can't you envision? It's like, oh no, another relay went down, and then you go down, you just see like 100 of them like digging their way into the sun.
It's just 100 Orthodox guys just looking up,
just
like
looking
they're like gophers.
Like, oi, get out of here! You're not supposed to be here. It's just like this weird. There's this one tech adept who's got like a broom and is trying to shoo them out of the property.
Because they keep accidentally damaging cables when they do this.
Yeah.
All right, but moving on to
Moving
the
on.
war.
As funny as that image is.
Oh, I love this image of him being a tyrant on his throne
With
Richard's
with
corpse.
Richard's dead body right there. Yeah.
Oh,
that
that's
head was
beautiful.
blasted clean off.
Yeah.
So anyway, I started blasting.
I started blasted.
It's one of the best pieces of art in the book.
Also, holy shit, that gun is fucking big.
Yeah, it was. It's supposed to be like an art piece, basically.
No, remember, Richard. This is like, remember, Rich. We do as we practice, and
Do as we practice and don't move when I point the gun at your face with my finger on the trigger.
also open your mouth and unhinge your gag reflex. You'll need this for later.
So, going on to the beginning, basically is again giving a little bit more of an overview of, I guess, how the setting began, and what happened before, and it's setting up primarily with the personalities, then the people of the Star League that are going to be involved in the conflict.
Yep, we do a list of,
Yeah.
we do essentially personas dramatae, which is the main characters of the farce, or would it be the tragedy?
I don't know, but they do have a nice little timeline thing, which is fun.
Oh yeah, right here. The key events of human history. By the way, Coyote
2011.
mentions before we do.
The second
Coyote mentioned
Soviet Civil.
before we mention. Coyote mentions Victor was also almost captured by the clans and did fight them with them, even having a clanner bodyguard that many suspect was more than one.
Was that an elemental?
That was Richard. No. You're thinking of somebody else that had the clanner. I can't remember. Who was this clanner bodyguard? I can't remember from the novels. But Victor was a weirdo, kind of. He had the yellow fever. He ended up banging the princess of the Triconus Combine. And
You know,
was
this
also a
further
manlet.
explains his anti-Semitism. Maybe he thinks that the Draconis Combines are the true inheritors of the 12 tribes, for all we fucking know.
The Jews fear the samurai.
Legitimately, if someone did like a Rogan like
Someone's
podcast
done
with
that.
Victor Davian Snyder, like just rambling like a nutcase about his opinions on things, if someone did an entire series of that, that'd be fucking amazing.
It reminds me of it's like, imagine mind you, the Jews fear the samurai image. You replace the swastika with the
With
Draconis
their-
Combine emblem. The clans fear the samurai.
Like just I could envision Victor like legitimately rambling, then he'll drop like some weird bit of anti-Semitism or like some bullshit from Alexander Dugin going like, yeah, and Fourth Fury posits that there should be a Eurasianist people, and he looks creepily at like a person from the Draconis.
There's a line from the new Shogun show where it's guy saying, "Enough of this Catholic nonsense." You just have the Steiner, or not Steiner, have the Draconis Combine in the background. No. This is because they, then I think they kill the new Avalon Pope.
Oh yeah, they did.
It's enough of this Christian nonsense.
But yes, they do have the talk of the first one is
they
they're
have the
talking about like the generals of the Star League. Janos Grek.
We're going from there. I thought you wanted because the timeline.
I was making a shit post about the fact that it's like 2011's commencement of the second Soviet Civil War.
Yeah, that's cute.
It's cute. They do have the talk about kind of like the timeline. So if you wanted to take a look at that, the first leader of this, of course, is Janos Grek, which he's the SLDF naval commander during this time, and he's the guy that figured out how to get through the SDS, which was not easy.
Especially since Amaris had years of rebuilding it. Since he did damage a decent amount when he took Terra, but by this point he had it repaired. Yeah, he had the unenviable task of trying to figure out how to essentially break into their own fortress.
Right. Also lost most of his family during the Civil War, aside from his daughter, who would go on to become one of the members of Clan Snow Raven. Which makes sense, because Snow Raven is like the naval clan. Up next is General Hayes, who is a certified badass, genuinely.
And ends up apparently commander of Comstar Armed Forces.
Yep, she became the first head of the Comm Guards. She fought all across Terra, all over the periphery as well. She's kind of she kind of went nuts, basically.
Well, keep in mind that almost a third under her command would be dead by the end of it.
Yeah, she also lost a hand.
Yeah.
So she basically went. She basically said, "Okay, I can't directly pilot a mech anymore. It's just one hand, because the bionic refit wasn't perfect." So she's like, "Okay." So she just hopped into the second seat of a dual cockpit.
Also, she was so fucking crazy that not even Toyama was willing to kill her.
Yeah, Toyama was pretty much
like he did a great purge. Even he lacked the balls to do it to her.
Basically put Toyama. Well, when we cover the second Succession War, I'm going to go on about Toyama, and like, there's a lot of people that are mad about a retcon, sort of, but I'm like, it kind of makes everything even more. I guess like about Comstar, it makes everything even more like fucked up, and that's kind of what I think is the best point, the best reason to go with it. That being the big reveal, because I think it actually works better that way. The SL Jack Lucas is kind of a fun one.
Jack Lucas needs more iodine. Look at the fucking goiter.
Son of a neo-Jesuit bishop. He's a part of he's behind the
was meant to be a
Jesuit.
priest and ended up in command of his of a regiment, then a full division.
Oh, he was he was around since the Periphery Uprising. That sounds painful.
He was. He managed to
Oh, and he's one of the few survivors of his entire division.
Yeah.
By the way, he started as, from what it looks like, he started as
an enlisted man, yeah.
He started basically as a sergeant/lieutenant. Like he ran a small wing of mech suits. That was it.
Yeah, he was a lance commander, and then ended up rising up.
By rising up, you mean
also Peter... he also rose up through, by the way, the standard SLDF ranks. He could have been part of the Royal Regiments, but because of paperwork stuff, he was not. Because the Royal Regiments were exclusively from the Terran hegemony. That was their big thing. That's the reason why they're called the Royal Regiments, is because ultimately they would be loyal to Star League above the member states, because the hegemony was the center of the Star League.
Also note that Lucas legitimately was promoted from, I think, 4 ranks within less than a year. That's the
there
level
was a lot of
casualties.
He would have retired at most as a lieutenant general.
He retired as a general and as a reverend, spending 4 decades as a parish priest. Next up, though, is Vincent Price, otherwise known as Antilios Lagos, commander of the Greenhaven Gestapo.
I actually really like the look they went for him, because that is...
I like Mr. Legos. You want to step on him.
They cite him as a new Adolf Hitler or Genghis Khan.
That's not entirely wrong, but actually, like I said, visually, design-wise, he feels like a role Lon Chaney would play.
Yeah, he's
like in a 40s like thriller movie. This is the type of guy you'd have play the head of an Orpo branch in Germany, just torturing someone for information, going, by the way, this is us being civil. If you don't give us what we wish, we'll have to be more creative. You wouldn't like us being creative.
He got the name because the mayor of a town he was, I guess, occupying likened him to the
Gestapo, which he
was amused by the.
So he called himself the Greenhaven Gestapo instead.
Yeah.
After the town he was garrisoning, which is fucking funny. And eventually, though, he ended up as part of Amaris' retinue, and effectively, of course, the most famous of which being the split of the church by murdering Pope Clement the 27th.
Because they didn't pay a ransom, because the church actually pretty much had all of their resources taken
confiscated by Amaris, yeah.
Which, if you think about how wealthy the Catholic Church is. Holy shit!
If
How
you're
much did people
wondering,
steal?
for comparison, when Henry VIII, who was constantly experiencing debt due to how prone he was to being celebratory, giving money on loans, and just building a lot of crap without really thinking through it, England was in debt, not to the Spanish degree, but it did constantly struggle to pay off its soldiers, especially since Henry liked going to war. Confiscating the monasteries completely undid the massive years of debt he inflicted
Yes.
of an
Also,
entire country.
apparently, Legos also ordered his men to have fun with the rest of the cardinals.
Yes, he did.
Considering what that might imply, what the fuck did they do?
So,
What was his problem with Rome?
So let's explain a little bit of just a little bit of insight into his childhood. They very clearly hint that he was born a sociopath and was abused.
Yeah.
The abuse is not a sympathetic thing. That just basically with sociopaths that usually helps wire them towards just full on becoming serial killers because it tells them that you can totally use force to get what you wish.
Also, like
and his associates and his subordinates include people nicknamed the Ogre and the Succubus, meaning the Greenhaven Gestapo was mostly filled with essentially the Durlowanger Brigade. These were hardcore criminals, murderers, psychopaths, rapists, criminals of the worst sort, the type that would commit war crimes that would make you just stare and go, holy fuck.
Yeah, and he was the one in charge of them.
He was the nastiest of them all. So you could just kind of leave to your imaginations what the poor old men of the Catholic clergy experienced under his tender mercies. Because it's going to be worse than what you're thinking.
Yeah. Then,
by the way, he also controlled Italy. Like, Italy was his personal plaything the entire time, too.
Yep.
I'm surprised the mafia didn't kill him.
Well, no, he's the one that was paying off the mafia. What do you think he was doing?
Zenyon, holy shit, he even looks like Durlwanger.
By the way,
yeah.
That's because he was intentionally modeled on him.
Oh.
Yeah. Then there's Patrick Scoffins, who looks like George W. Bush merged with
a German general.
He looks like he looks like a fusion of an there was this evangelical preacher that like claimed a bunch of weird shit. He looks like a combination of W. Bush, a German commander, and a televangelist. But yeah, Zen Gunman, he was modeled off of Durlowanger. By the way, he also outlived Amaris.
Yeah, he did.
They legitimately had to do a second campaign to essentially crack open Italy and then horribly execute him in a very messy way because holy shit, that's what he deserves.
So the next guy, Patrick, he was the commanding general.
He didn't outlive Amaris at all. He was remember the campaign took 2 years. Italy was one of the first places they landed, so he's actually one of the earlier casualties in the higher levels.
That's weird because it says here that he basically destroyed Italy for like 12 years.
Well, he did because they controlled. Remember, they took over in '66, so around 12 years. They probably just got a little. They were probably using a dozen years as an exaggeration there.
Okay.
So, he's, I guess, supposed to be your honorable German general. You know,
Which, by the way, no, they knew where the bodies were hidden. They were okay with the bodies being hidden. They just didn't want to know where they were because that would inculcate them. Yeah, that would get them in trouble.
That said, Scoffins, though, definitely rose through the ranks through merit more than anything else.
He is tried and convicted of crimes against humanity and then hung.
Yes. A lot of that is because he authorized.
He carried out Amaris's orders.
Yeah.
Right.
And reminder, Amaris was the type of dude who condemned tens of millions to death just because he wanted a solar cannon.
Right.
Next up is Lisa Outerbridge, Inner Sphere born, raised wealthy, but she was the director of policy and doctrine.
Yeah, she was basically his propaganda.
This would be his Goebbels, or actually, since they're going for a Nazi vibe with these guys,
Goebbels and Himmler.
No, not Himmler. What's her name? The lady who filmed the Olympics. The reason why all of the pageantry of the Olympics came about. Rylstocker, Lani Riefenstacker or something. I forget how to pronounce her name.
Yeah.
In any case, she kind of was doing a lot of political and communication stuff. She wasn't really like the full propaganda guy. That would be kind of the next one.
Which is why I think
the
she's
guy-
based on literally I forget how to pronounce her name, but
Lena Reinsch. We all know who she is.
yes,
Yeah.
she is based on
Next
her.
up is PewDiePie.
Yeah,
Samir Najari. Samir Najari is legitimately like
this is PewDiePie's descendant, like right before being tried for war crimes.
he literally faked that entire battle that we were talking about before, the Gaudamerung.
He's
Oh.
the guy that came up with that.
He was the head of the propaganda ministry and also the somewhat of the secret police. His like the OPD is a bit different, but like this is the other thing. Yeah, fathered 5 illegitimate children.
Was tried for war crimes, crimes against Star League, and crimes against humanity, acquitted of crimes of genocide.
Yeah,
Yes.
because if you're wondering, one of the things he also was known for was managing Amaris's public image. He's the one that came up with the illusion that he was actually a jolly fool.
Right. Also, I kind of love this. His descendants are still part of Comstar.
Yep.
Well, not anymore.
Oh, by the way, yeah, it's Leni Riefenstahl. Sorry, I couldn't get the name right, Zen.
Yeah. Execution was set for 9th of October, but on 17th of September, an agent smuggled poison for him.
Himmler's death.
Is Comstar still around in?
No.
31. Yeah, so
it was broken apart.
Not anymore. It got broken apart and then sort of obliterated.
Next
arguably,
up
there's still loyalists to it somewhere here, but not really anywhere that are prominent.
Aisling Connor,
Director of Economic Development.
Born in Dublin.
She became a child model at the age of 6, became a fashion figure.
Yeah, she was fucked. She was fucked. Her, like, the moment her parents decided to use her to make money, she was fucked.
The main thing, though, is she was actually a brilliant economist. She married a businessman for 6 years. They divorced. She was genuinely intelligent. Like she kind of played like the darling, sweet, and charming, but then like, yeah, no, she's a fucking sociopath. Just so you know.
May have had the child with Najira.
Yeah.
Also, let's see. Arraigned for trial, found guilty, was not received the death penalty, but sentenced to 10 years in a penitentiary on Mars.
Because, well, she didn't care about the suffering and basically work quotas that she mandated.
She didn't actually directly. She's basically the what's his name? Spear, yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, I set industrial mandates. I made sure the machine was running. I did not personally order any of the punishment measures.
She also did design. Here's how we're gonna do the Amaris. Make a revitalized RimWorld's architectural design on Terra.
It's just gonna be neoclassical nods. I can feel it.
Yeah, neoclassical and a big. We're gonna take that dome in Las Vegas and just make a big one with Amaris's face.
Oh, that'd be hilarious.
A big smiling face for everyone to see.
Yeah, and then we get Blake,
who is looking like
he looks like
a 90s computer programmer.
No, he doesn't. Partially yes, but then you add an Amish beard.
Mixed with an Amish. I was about to say mixed with an Amishman.
If you're wondering, the Amish actually do not have mustaches because they see it as a symbol of war, and this was their way to basically announce that they were pacifists, because traditionally mustaches were allowed in the military. That's why they. It's actually similar to how in Islam, it is not the mustache that they grow. The mustache is usually used to show charisma, care, and also a martial spirit. The beard signifies devotion to Allah.
Well, it's also the fact that both Judaism and Islam, at least I think with Islam, you're not supposed to have like a razor blade cut your.
That's the other aspect. Basically, they have laws on grooming, which is why.
So Blake, born in the Great Lakes region.
A lot of this kind of got retconned partially.
Not
What is
super
does he
a
look
lot.
like Canadian Great Lakes or American Great Lakes?
Just the American Great Lakes.
Okay, now we have to whittle it down. Which state?
He feels like a
Obviously,
he feels
he
like a
is from
Youper.
Wisconsin.
He feels like a Youper from Wisconsin. I'm gonna be honest with you.
I'm saying Wisconsin because I can see this man.
North Wisconsin or Upper Peninsula.
Like
that
like I
energy.
can see this man like smashing back beers and talking about the Packers.
No, I can see him.
know
He
this man as
stumbles into Red Letter Media into like a half in the bag episode. It's like, so what did you think of my movie, Mike?
What did you think of my movie, Mike? I can see.
And then
you can see
Mike
his
like
face on
has a
Red Letter.
traumatized face, like he's doing a war flashback, and then he cuts to him going, "I loved it."
This is the kind of face that you would see on Red Letter Media as one of the guests. Hey, Jerome, what'd you think of Transformers 5?
I
whatever
think
the
an
fuck.
AI could make a better movie. In fact, I'm already making an AI to make a
I'm
better
making
movie.
that AI. The other thing is I can imagine him with 3 DUIs because it's Wisconsin.
This is the type of man who builds like an entire factory to mine bitcoins to use for like his weird scheme to rule the world or something. He feels like a Frank Armadeo, like his plot to take over fucking the Congo.
But okay, so he part of the HPG network, and as we all know, ends up surviving, gets promoted to become restoring the HPG network and creating Comstar.
Yeah, essentially, he has a minor breakdown, mental breakdown, because of the Amara Civil War.
Yeah, he's one of the few guys that's actually trying to keep anything running during all this.
Because
it's kind of nuts.
He saw what happened in the hegemony, and he basically goes, well, we're about to enter a technological dark age. How the fuck do we prevent that?
Basically, his entire thing was we need to control the comm network. We need to keep the comm network running so that we don't have worlds go out of contact and die.
Because that was a common tactic that Amaris did use.
Well, partially, but it's also just the fact is that if a world experienced a disaster and couldn't communicate for help, that was a problem. So yeah, that was his whole thing. The next bit that's actually very interesting with that is that they talk a bit about how the whole the Comstar gets made.
Yeah.
And
as Jeremy's saying, speaking of Blake, I wonder how you would react to the word of Blake faction. Same way the Emperor would view the ecclesiarchy.
It's very interesting that we're going to talk about that in the second.
Yeah, we kind of have to, because Blake himself, he came up with essentially a way to try to ensure that technology survived. So he'd have conflicted feelings about this. I don't think he'd fully hate them like what you'd expect, but
we'll talk about that when we get to it.
Yeah,
it's sort of a retcon, but it's not really, honestly.
And next up is Conrad Toyama, who.
Well, just one last comment. Kerensky refused to take the spot to fix the hegemony. This is where and why Comstar got so popular and powerful.
Because they got Terra. They got Terra with all of its shit as their world.
Because Kerensky gave up, and Blake was like, "Well, fuck, someone has to do it."
Someone has to do it.
So
they got the largest shipyards in the inner sphere that still are able to make jump ships. They're one of the few powers that could. Like they had so much going for them because they managed to stay out of the goddamn shit show that was the Succession Wars.
And it's because of Blake.
Styx was where Toyama was from. He was only 14 when it took over, but he basically became a black market guy that was bribing the Maris Empire. Then the DCMS forces beat the shit out of him for it.
Yeah.
And he was fined by the SLDF. In any case, he kind of joined up with one of the repair teams and met Blake. And essentially this got him off world and got Blake to talk with him and kind of see him as like a protege, because the dude was brilliant.
He's brilliant, charming, and remember, he was a con man, so he was very good at making you like him.
a charming rogue, is a good way to put it. Like, he was not he wasn't like, I would call it like somebody that just got to his position because he didn't know shit. No, he did know his shit.
He was educated. He was unscrupulous when he needed to be.
Yeah.
But he knew what he was doing. He also knew how to advertise. In fact, he's the one that coined the name Comstar.
Yeah.
Because it just rolled off the tongue. It was a lot more memorable.
As Zen was saying, Jerome Blake breaking Amish, I think Blake is your Walter White, and Conrad is your Jesse Pinkman.
Jesse, we have to start the HPG networks.
Conrad, we have to start a religion.
Conrad, we need to start a religion.
It's time to code. I am the one who makes the back doors.
I am the one who does the C-bill.
Wait, then who's Saul Goodman? For this
shit. Let's move on from that analogy. He was really absolutely fucking nuts. Toyama was brilliant as a leader, but he arguably bit off a little bit more than he could chew during the Second Succession War.
Also dead of a stroke.
Died of a stroke.
So here's the thing. Toyama himself, yeah, he was nuts. Basically, Blake wanted to keep it more like a commercial enterprise, and his disagreeing with his savior status, basically Toyama saw him as sort of a savior figure.
Are you? You know what? Fuck it. We'll cover it because I don't know when we're going to cover the Succession Wars book. So here's the thing.
We can do it real short.
We'll do it really quickly. The new lore released in the Succession Wars book is actually a bit of a reversal. So here's the basics of it. Blake wanted to make goddamn sure that the HPG network would be maintained. So he started basically encoding essentially a holy book, because his whole logic was like that of like the what was it, the Chronicles of Leibowitz style of stuff, where it's like we need to keep somebody that knows how to keep these things running no matter what.
Yeah, that's what I was referencing. Yeah.
And Toyama was kind of going like, this could go really badly. Like we could end up in a situation where we have fanatics and all that, and basically Blake looks at Toyama and goes, "That's kind of what we need to have happen."
Like,
we need to start.
Listen, when has fanatics for religion ever gone wrong?
It's less the fanatics and more like, we need people to believe this, and I need you to sell it. I need you to sell it with all of the effort you can. And so, thus, after Blake's death, Toyama immediately moves to purge everyone that could possibly threaten his position, and that is going against the idea of Blake potentially being some sort of prophet. Because that's what Blake wanted.
So some of that, I think it's a case of it being phrased badly.
Yeah.
Because the way I interpreted it, and I've said this actually a couple times already in the stream, Blake did that as kind of an emergency option. He might have done something like that and mused that because of so much loss of technology that this might be the only way to make sure anyone knows. He might have said that. And then when he died, Toyama, terrified, because I think this is around the time that the Second Succession War happened. He already saw it happen with the first one.
This was in between them.
Either way, like, he saw the effects of the war. He was, he experienced the Amaris Civil War. He saw a lot of shit get lost. I could see I could see it kind of being a case where it's a little bit of both.
It also didn't help that both men were fans of the Adeptus Mechanicus.
both men had massive AdMech armies.
They both ran AdMech armies.
Listen, if we're in control of the HPG network, we can 3D print all of the Skitarii we want. No longer are we paying $1 per point.
The very first thing Toyama did when Blake died was he bought GW so that he had the rights to the official molds.
But yes, they then give us a nice map of the campaign into the hegemony.
But yeah, we'll talk about that in more detail in the Second Succession War, because that's kind of important. Sorry.
It's an important part of it. It's not what I would call like the most vital, but it's an important little detail that, like, yes, it's a retcon. I kind of like it more that way personally. That Blake was like, no, we need to go for the full techno-religious shit, because it fits the nature of, like, we need to preserve everything at all costs, which he seemed to have. way better than I'm just some nerd that's pushing pencils.
His logic makes sense. I would say it's more the way it was framed.
Yeah. The um
Which isn't a negative. I think it's a case of it was framed poorly. I like the battle map. It's really cute that they even have the border key operation moments too.
Yeah.
So at this time, Amaris is going to deep fear and paranoia.
The Asta mistake.
He was swinging his pistol around, raging at no one about the devil Kerensky. By then, the royal guards were removing at least one corpse from the palace a week, shot dead by the emperor's hands.
He kept calling them Richard for some reason, and no one knows why.
No one knows why.
Hey, Richard.
Hey, so the Asta mistake. So basically, in the last days of 774, he was growing more and more sullen because, basically put, the lines are closing in.
Also, Kerensky just rolled up his actual empire officially, like his Rimworld Republic.
The Rimworld Republic is gone, and the outer edges of the hegemony also gone. Like when you look at the wave here, by 774, where that line is, everything in the lighter gray is what was taken by the SLDF.
Yep. At this point, they are reduced to a couple dozen worlds, really.
They lost a lot of their strategic depth already. The hegemony never had much compared to the other great powers, but the main thing it had was really hard to take worlds, arguably. And the
SLDF
at
this point, they only had 3 district capitals left. They lost most of them.
So the next thing is that one of the worlds was Asta, which was on the list of worlds that had no strategic importance. The major problem with this was that he glanced at it, he approves it, then he takes another look at it, and it's like Asta is within 30 light years of Terra. To understand, that's like 2 jumps.
Yeah. It's within 2 jumps. 30 light years is actually relatively close in terms of planetary neighborhoods too.
Yeah, because I think the distance you can jump in Battletech is like 15 light years. Let me double check that.
It probably also depends on certain situations. I wouldn't be surprised if it's like between 12 and 18.
So, Asta, because it's obviously an important world, but it's never been brought before.
Maximum jump range is roughly 30 light years. Okay, so yeah, that would be
within.
So
Amaris is terrified because it's within 2 reliable jumps.
Can now jump in.
But if they're risky, if they want to play risks, they could legitimately just jump right on Terra.
Yes.
It's not wise, but they could do it.
Right. And this is a world that they were like, we need to abandon the non-strategic ones. We need to establish a 30 light year zone of control.
Anything good happening? Stefan Amaris is killing people because he keeps thinking they're Richard and he's panicking over Asta. It's pretty great.
So they blame this on some colonel. And then on to General Mullen, which is
Mullen's counterattack.
Yeah. The routing data, however, wasn't changed. The message still got delivered. Asta was certainly a world that held no strategic value and did not have defensive measures. Unwritten was the implication these worlds would readily follow the SLDF, so he had to obey. So he destroyed all of the facilities, pulled up stakes, and leaves. Mullen was then brought before Amaris, ordered all the prisoners around him shot, ordered his entire family shot, along with one of his other generals that was in charge of the strategic command.
No. He specifically got his consort, his mistress, and the youngest child they had and shot him.
Yeah.
Shot both of them.
Yeah.
He forced Nor to watch. He forced Nor to watch as he did this.
He made Nor execute his consort and son. Nor was then transferred to Carver 5, where he died, of course, because Carver 5 is still holding out. Remember the crazy world full of like
Wake Island?
Marines?
It's the atoll.
It's Wake Island.
It's the atoll island world.
Yeah. Now they'd gotten by this point some reinforcements were dropped in, some extra supplies. They even talk about it on the next page after here when they're talking about like the tripwire. So basically the all worlds outside of 30 light year radius around Terra have to be withdrawn and scorched out. So basically put, the entire point was to tie down the SLDF with relief operations and having to defuse the WMD nightmare that they would leave behind with targeted nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons.
Yes, because Amaris was more than willing to crack them open. He was. He happily did
Yeah,
repeatedly.
because it was the only way to slow down the SLDF. Because the SLDF, because Kerensky wasn't a complete monster, was trying to help the people of the hegemony.
And
Which then
also,
goes, of
because they
course, to
burned
the
all the
fact-
logistics, yeah, they had to set up anyway. Even if they didn't care, they still had to set
Right.
up supply
So-
bases.
So
Right.
by
Then Carver 4, by the way, Carver 5 is still fighting at this point. It's still going on
Yep.
as like the most meat grinder of campaigns possible for the Ameris Empire, because they have to try to land in a place with an intact SDS system and a bunch on a water world controlled by forces that are specifically trained to fight a naval island hopping campaign on a world dominated by archipelagos.
And their KO shot was foiled because of paranoia from the base commanders who legitimately just had basic safety protocols to prevent rogue agents from stealing nuclear warheads.
Right.
Which
Quantico
would have
Base
applied to
basically,
any other great house, by the way.
Quantico
So-
Base is basically like a Malta. It's absolutely nuts. Basically,
So- so sort of as all this is going on, by 2774, the SLEF is realizing that their lines of communication, their supply lines are getting thin, so they need to regroup and plan. They set up a Taltha conference, trying to figure out, okay, how do we take
how
out
do we
Amaris?
actually do this?
Essentially, it's sort of like a Yalta in a way. Like, how do we?
There's like, it's been 2 years. They've taken a bunch of time. They've taken a bunch of worlds, but like everyone is tired. They've been fighting for 2 years. Resources are kind of getting expended at rates that maybe should not be. There's just like a lot of grinding times. There's not enough supply lines. There's all this sort of stuff. The next step, of course, is to try to free the rest of the hegemony, and they have like this conference where they're talking about all this sort of stuff.
Also, something to add: there were several vehicle bombings and sniper attacks at the base where they were meeting, which does mean that the SODF was compromised.
Yeah, they had issues.
Especially since they had a lot of rotation. Like a lot of fucking casualties means that you had to suck in more people from different sources.
You had to
that
suck
you
in
couldn't
more
rely
men,
on.
but it's also the sniper attacks is more the thing that there were stay behind units being left by Amaris to conduct these sort of operations.
And
like
basically, the result of this was that the SLDF would need Great House support. There was no way that they could win without them.
Which isn't great for them because that completely weakens Star League because they're asking for help.
Yeah, the basically the point too here is that like we need support from the houses. Well, the houses are going to give us fucking support because they're the houses. They don't care.
They also, several of them just kind of hate Star League in general on principle.
It's also that the civilians in these worlds are basically being thrown through NBC warfare with no training. The SLDF knows how to handle themselves on basically World War III-esque battlefields where it's like there's been 3 tactical nuclear strikes nearby, the chemical weapons have been pointed out, and someone is claiming that there were anthrax deployments. We need to take that hill. They're trained for that. But
the first guy to show up with support, Kurita.
Yes, because you got to remember this. Kurita there's a hostage on the world. Kurita has been from the shadows actually supporting Kerensky. As I mentioned before, they were doing things to root out Amaris terror units and cells like that. The really interesting thing with that is that, for example,
they what?
The one commander.
You cut out
the
what?
SLDF.
No, you cut out what?
They were the ones that sent like the box with like a head in it to the SLDF commander.
Oh yeah, the Black
like
Cat scenario.
Yeah, the Nekogami, which are their basically their assassin corps. The Kurita is also doing their own play, which is that they're making a play for worlds that were totally part of the Combine. We swear the hegemony were just holding them for us.
Though Kurita's involvement does end up inspiring some of the other houses.
The other houses start moving when he starts taking them. It's one of those things where Kerensky can't fight. back on this. And the thing is that Kurita is genuinely doing humanitarian aid, which is a shock because it's fucking Kurita. But
If House Kurita is providing humanitarian aid, you know things are terrible.
yeah.
When the Kuritans find something disgusting.
So did apparently so did the Capellans.
Well, I mean, the
Davian-
Capellans would, but then they'd like secretly poison it with like a mind control drug. Let's be fair.
The Federated Sons and the Lyrans also sent aid. Merrick sends troops.
Yep. And then everybody else starts to send troops as well. There was some fighting with Merrick forces as well. There were 2 companies that were destroyed from the first Merrick from the Merrick regulars and the Merrick militia. There is kind of some interesting backlash from this, because the other thing you have to note is that the 13 years of total war have just been happening.
Yep.
They have to get military supplies from somewhere. So the Rimrose Republic, which has just been taken over by the Lyrans, is supplying a bunch of shit to the SLDF, but there's a lot of other issues. So, for example, the second tier defense contractors are hoping to sell shit, because the first tier ones were in the hegemony. The SLDF doesn't actually have them. The SLDF has to like go for a bunch of like what could be called budget designs. For example, Blackjack.
Vulcan.
Yep.
Blackjack was already recruited. Vulcan is one of those interesting ones. Grasshopper was designed for the war, never actually saw service in time for it. Same thing with the Enforcer, if I remember correctly. The other one that's interested is, of course, the quick sell effect. Because these suppliers aren't all working on the same memo, they don't always make parts that are compatible with each other for even the same vehicle that they're both making. So you would have issues with that in logistics, but it was what was available. It's what you have to use. Things that would be scrapped had to be brought back into service. All these, they're kind of like cobbled together Frankenmechs were being used at points, because it's like we need to get this archer back into the battle, but we've only got a Warhammer head. Fuck it, slap it on. We can make it work. It's stuff like that.
Also, there are some lovely little bits here and there. My favorite is actually on page 31, which I was kind of reading low key. It's 2 articles written in essentially Amaris space, like that are completely propaganda bits, and it's just great.
Yeah, it's
The simple truth that Kerensky's war is both illegal and immoral. Star League recruiting stations across space are closing down on a daily basis because the listless youth are no longer allowing the Cameronists to pollute their mind with false tales of the honorable knight.
Yeah, the other problem too is that these scorched earth tactics during the operation that Amaris is pulling out is that he has to devote a lot of his reserve into action and basically stop the advance. It basically like went into the shit. Upside though, they managed to get the SDS system. Narasaki Computers was this big designer on the world of Narasaki. There was actually a lot of clandestine activity on Narasaki between like what was left of the SLDF commandos and the Amaris guys, where they were trying to kill anyone who knew anything about the SDS system, the Star League guys, to prevent Amaris from continuing operating it. Didn't work out, but the major the SLDS and stole a bunch of stuff. But they were able to find some of the stuff. There's a computer hidden away in a cleaning closet.
Here's the question: what page are you on when you're talking?
34.
Oh, sorry, man. It's just I didn't see Murasaki at all when I was skimming through.
Sorry.
I see New Home. I see Get the Show on the Road. I saw Karma Wheel.
Yeah, Karma Wheel is the Narasaki.
I didn't see that. Apologies, viewers.
Yeah. So they talk about Project Nike and the SDS stuff. One of the fun bits was that they made notes because the personal computer was actually a bunch of stuff about like everything about the thing because the researchers realized what was going on, and so they squirreled away a computer, like a laptop, just filled with as much information as they could into a cleaning closet where no one would look for it. When they were being, pulled out. So they managed to provide actually a bunch of details, and they're like, we did too good of a job, guys.
Also, on top of that, they made an
Deadly.
SDS jammer.
Yeah, so they made an SDS jammer, which helped a lot, but there were ways around it. They would there was some other stuff that was going on, and the system was enough to start to go into these SLDS stuff. The other problem is the casualties. Casualties and mental shit was just taking a real toll on the SDS.
Getting quiet
on
and
the
getting
SLDF.
muddled.
The SLDF is suffering a lot from exhaustion at this point. There's a lot of AWOLs. There's a lot of other shit. Can you hear me better?
I can hear you better now. Sorry about that.
Yeah. New Home was taken next, which was the first of the SDS systems.
Oh, I'll also like to note that hardened veterans were physically and emotionally... That's a fucking understatement. By this point, a lot of them would be complete and total wrecks. Like, so here's the thing: in the military, I believe, what was it, 180 days of combat is the maximum before you have to rotate them off. You have to rotate a soldier off after X amount of months, because otherwise they will break. They will completely snap.
Every jump is at least a week of transit. So that does provide, for example, for a longer jump period, that things are working out well. You can
hypothetically, a week. There's a reason why traditionally furloughs are like 30 days, dude.
Yeah.
Because after that much, legitimately, your systems will crash. Your body is not meant to handle repeated stress for that long. And these are people that have done this for 13 years.
Well, you see, you know what would fix that? What if you had a genetically engineered soldier that, through a series of eugenic programs, was completely designed to fight?
We don't. Let's go off on from crazy things that are only planned by furries to.
I mean, here's the thing: that concept isn't stupid. It's just the way the clanners are written are usually kind of a little too stupid for my
short,
tastes.
high intensity warfare. They don't like.
Well, what about
campaigns?
Well, what about this then? What if you kidnap children while they're like in their infancy, and then physically train them, as well as inserting biological and mechanical implants in them, so that they become a complete soldier and totally devoted to your military? Now, here's a question: which fictional series am I talking about?
Zen Gunman, your multiple year deployments are usually low intensity. I mean an active battle site like the fucking Somme, dude. Like the fucking Somme or Monte Cassino.
Like a lot of these.
Like we're not talking
high intensity.
low intensity. We're talking like meat grinder, like Verdun.
Some of these battles, especially when they're breaking out the nuclear biological warfare, was Verdun, like levels of just like
that's the type I mean. I don't mean you're on patrol and occasionally you get pot shotted in IEDs. Like that can still cause damage because it causes
that was still happening across this war, but like that was the major fighting.
I'm talking like the active combat fronts where you have to rotate people off.
Also, imagine this. You know how people got shell shock from the constant bombing of artillery?
Add on shell shock, more like they're deafened and hungover and traumatized by this point because half their unit got wiped.
Imagine that, along with the sound. I'm assuming in Battletech, lasers make sounds.
They do, probably.
Pew pew.
Missiles firing. Depending on whatever mech it is, it could be an LRM-20 or it could be an SRM-2, but it's still missiles.
The sound of cannons, the sound of hydraulics moving as you feel the earth shake, and you just look up, and you hope to God that they don't chart you in your little bunker or foxhole, and hope they walk forward.
Skull face of an Atlas.
Yeah, because that's the other thing. A lot of SLDF equipment ended up in the hands of the Amaris Empire. They had a lot of it, so they were issuing it and fighting the SLDF with often some of their own stuff. There was a lot of this sort of shit. They even talk a little bit about the fighting on the planets here. The other thing is Don't Stop Me Now, which is actually kind of a fun bit that they talk about on page
You're
36,
having
where they're
such a
talking.
good time.
Yeah, they're talking about the Amaris trying to erase the Cameron legacy, along with Krupp Stellar Technologies AEM-01 Dragoon battle mech. It was the basically the Amaris planned to make an entirely new line for battle mechs to standardize things.
The Screamer LAM, Rifleman 3. Oh,
Yeah.
and the Matar, which ended up creating the Stone Rhino.
Yes.
Yep.
Also the Omega, which was a World of Blake thing. A few designs are kind of interesting. Like the Rifleman 3 design is very interesting from like how do we make the Gothzilla, but it's stealthy.
Also, if you're
Goth
wondering, Amaris couldn't get most of these just because he never had enough of a lock to actually redo everything like he wanted.
That said, the Dragoon was actually a relatively successful project. It actually was part of the reason why Omnimex were made, because the Dragoon was designed to be, at least the arm weapons were designed to be completely modular. Like you could just remove an arm and replace it with another one, to create a variant, which was pretty cool. The Mercury was another mech that was like that. The more interesting thing, though, is the designation AEM, basically Amaris Empire mech. Because usually the designation comes from the name itself, shortened down, like RLM, or like RLF for Rifleman.
Well, I mean, he wanted to name it himself.
Yeah, because it's Amaris.
Also, I do find it hilarious that they're really going on the German analog by having Krupp build it.
Wunderwaffen. We'll
The
have a mech.
Dragoon was
Wait.
not a wonder weapon, though. It was
It was just a solid mech.
We'll have a mech that can shoot its arm cannon across a corner without turning.
Well, no, like the whole thing about the whole
Right,
thing
right.
is he wanted to completely redefine mech warfare because a lot of the problems were you had competing designs for the same niche, which plays havoc on logistics. And
Not really. The main problem he had was that there's a lot of equipment they already had. Retooling on the line to something completely new was not going to be able to happen.
well, I
And
mean,
also,
getting it out, but like his logic for making it, besides ego, because it is a lot of it ego, was because even before then, like the different mech line models that they had were like you had multiple fulfilling the same role because different companies made them, and you had to do kind of like grift, especially with Great House shit.
yeah,
This was his attempt to basically rationalize, but the problem is he could never do it because he was in the middle of a war for existence. And unlike the World War II era Germans, he was a little bit more aware than they were that you couldn't just cancel and rejigger the line so that you can get a slightly more perfect model. He was
yeah,
crazy, but he wasn't stupid.
yeah. They then go into like the various operations to take worlds, including
Like Coppola, Fletcher.
Cola, Fletcher,
Ingress, Cephal.
Ingress, Northwind. Small World. Is that just the name of the planet?
Yes,
Yeah, it was
Small
just
World.
called Small World. It's an icy world with a tiny population. The reason it was important was because it had a lot of resources.
Yeah. So they landed on it and they took it up, and it was a SLDF headquarter world as well. It actually took a long time to secure because there was a bunch of underground tunnels
Which is
that were being
similar to actually, I think Iwo Jima had that problem as well as Truk.
Yeah, there was literally 2 Castle Bryans on one world that wasn't Earth. That's pretty heavily defended for.
That tells you a lot about how important Small World was. It probably had some very critical heavy metal elements that you need.
It did, but the abandoned mines were also incredibly good resource storage locations because it was a cold environment, so you didn't have to worry as much about moisture
Oh
in the
yeah,
air.
like a lot of
So it was
you
nice
can
and
keep a
cold
lot
and
of
dry.
documents and stuff there too.
Yeah, so it was a perfect place to store munitions.
As Zen was saying, because before the Ameris coup, the SDF was buying weapons sight unseen to keep them out of the hands of the great houses.
They
Yeah.
were. There was a lot of that. There was also a lot of they didn't want the periphery to rearm, so buying weapons from manufacturers before they could sell them under the table to elements in the periphery.
Yep, choke
Very
out the
important.
market means that you can't see. I can understand Amaris there, and I understand why it failed.
Yeah.
Skip to page 42. There's a very cool image of
Well, you don't want to talk about the Northwind Highlanders?
don't they come after?
We'll get to, the Northwind Highlanders are. They're going to talk about them.
Fair enough.
They were already in existence, by the way. The Northwind was a strictly pro-Cameron world. This is part of the reason why the Highlanders were allowed to exist as a mercenary unit still, was that the Cameron dynasty had used them at various points, and the Northwind Highlanders were the origin unit for the Blackwatch. Unironically, the Blackwatch, well, not really the origin unit, like the Blackwatch, the Blackwatch Royal Bodyguard came was the source unit for the Highlanders. Like former Highlanders often joined the Blackwatch. That's where they got their training, and then they join the defense, basically the bodyguard unit.
Yeah, again, the 80s were a time of Gaelic and Scottish Abu, kind of like Gaelabu.
Yeah, look, they saw Braveheart once, and they really liked it.
Well, not just Braveheart. There was also Highlander and like other things like that.
Yeah,
Are those what? Those aren't
we'll get to them. Those are thugs.
Yeah. Oh, there is one comment I want to make.
They look cute.
They are great. I like the costume. I just wanted to.
I like the D-Day sort of mech landing.
That too.
That's unironically they have vehicles for that in BattleTech, and they're statted and everything. It's kind of cool.
Oh.
But yes, when we're talking about the landing here, up in the back, the Irby looking guys are Flashmen. They were one of the SLDF's primary heavy mechs because they were very fast and carried an entirely energy-based armament. They run incredibly hot, but it's very hard to get a mech of its size and speed that can hit as hard as a Flashman. So they were very popular. Even the downgraded versions are still terrifying. 3 large lasers is nothing to sneeze at.
Also, yeah, Zen. Yep, the Blackwatch is a real active unit in the British military.
Yes. So basically, the Blackwatch.
They're also the only ones. They're the only regiment that also can still wear the kilt.
Yes, along with all the other Highlander regiments. There were other Highlander.
Most of them, though, have been incorporated to an all-Scottish unit.
Are the Kamikaze Highlanders still in existence?
I don't know. Anyway.
Speaking of mercenaries, since the
no Monty
Northwind,
Python reference. Come on.
Speaking of the Northwind mercenaries, a fun, if you're gonna do like a weird sci-fi or fantasy setting, a really fun place to look into is actually Corsica, because Corsica during the same time period as the Blackwatch units, they were a dumping ground for mercenaries. A lot of countries in Europe had Corsican regiments on hand.
Yes. The main thing about like
banditry, vendetta, and hunting were kind of the few things that they could do other than chestnut farming.
Right. The other bit with this is that the SLDF has got they're working on getting through. They finally get to Carver 5.
Carver 5, which was
Carver 5 is absolutely nuts.
And I think this landing is on Carver 5.
It might be. I doubt it because...
No, because of the water and them doing D-Day landings and shit. I feel like this is a Carver 5 portrait.
It might be meant to be, but it's really not. So
cool,
Carver 5 is one of my favorite battles in the entire one because it's like... So, Quantico Islands...
Let's combine Wake, Okinawa,
and
Iwo
the Siege of Malta.
And Guadalcanal.
And the Siege of Malta, both of them. Like the World War II one and the one that the Ottomans
all of the World War II island battles and campaigns.
It was absolutely nuts. So basically, even with warships in orbit, they weren't actually able to establish aerospace dominance.
Because they failed to knock out Quantico, which was that big of an airbase. And also they had several other ones still operational.
It was also many ground-to-orbit mobile batteries. My thought on that is that they don't specify this, but I like to imagine that basically put for training reasons, they had orbital batteries positioned on like submarines, right? So because the world's a water world, they could reposition these mobile batteries almost anywhere.
I do like the submarine idea. That does sound pretty great, actually. Also, it makes
it's
sense
like
because subs are missile capable. So if you just get a large enough missile,
they can be spotted from orbit with certain imagers and all this sort of stuff, but it's like the water is an atmosphere distance is still like pretty impressive, and you might not be able to recognize it. And the second that it surfaces and starts to throw at you, there's a lot of space to cover. So yeah, you're probably not going to be looking
congratulations.
in the right place. Well, there's suddenly you getting a missile alarm in low orbit because there's like there's this fucking Ohio class that's basically just snuck up on you and has dumped its bins and gone back underwater.
And oh
So you
no,
can't get
no,
rid of
these
it.
things run pretty darn cool until they've used their system. So now they're just using the water to mask their heat signatures. Good
Mask the
luck.
heat signature again. Good luck finding them. Which the other thing with that is that they
They
ended up
also
having the
kept
third.
their castle, Brian. Good luck digging them out.
Basically, yes, that's what Quantica was. It was a makeshift castle, Brian. The
And
other
don't
bit,
forget the other atolls, which whenever they take one, they turn them into mini death fortresses.
and they talk. There's a bit of more modern writing about the third the Iridani Light Horse, which is the third RCT, which had elements that ended up reinforcing Carver 5, and ended up in the shit basically with them. Where it's like Carver 5 is one of those campaigns where it's like the 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 SLTF is resupplying off of the Amaris Empire, sending men to die there. It's like absolutely nuts. The Danger Zone lecture is fantastic. It's the memoirs of the commanding officer at Quantico, the surviving commanding officer, because they lost one. They basically had 4,000 Marines along with another 5,000 SLDF personnel, SDS batteries, battle mechs, fighters, heavy armor, and 9 years we defended against that fat bastard.
Yeah.
I fucking love this guy. We like we had 4,000.
The whole thing is beautiful. Forgive me for my language, but if you weren't there, you don't know a goddamn thing. Let me make this perfectly clear. My Marines never once needed rescuing. Those assholes tried and failed to take us out when that fat bastard killed Richard Cameron. They tried again and failed again, even with reinforcements, when they failed to realize that was the resolve and training of a Star League Marine. We had almost 4,000 Marines on Quantico when those bastards came, along with another 5,000 SLDF personnel from recruits to 40-year vets. We had SDS batteries, heavy armor, battle mechs, and fighters. And we had the most powerful weapon Star League ever leveraged, support and trust of our civvies. Quantico held up against the best that Stefan Amaris could throw at us for 9 years. For 9 long years, we devoted our every waking moment to vigorously defend the ideals of Ian Cameron. And for 9 long years, the men, women, and children that called Quantico home threw themselves into the battle against true evil. When this battle began, we only had 4,000 Marines. By the end, we had better than 20,000 fighting day in and day out, but just as many dead. Fathers and mothers of Quantico gave us their support, and they trusted us with their sons and daughters. In return, we willingly traded our lives for theirs. Many so-called historians have written at length about Carver 5's campaign and about 24th Army Group's relief of my Marines. How this dedicated handful of men and women only survived because of the ongoing support provided by the 3rd Regimental Combat Team, or the Secret Fleet, or 5th Army. But what they all failed to understand and therefore failed to report was just how important these Marines' efforts really were for the war. Marines of Carver 5 fought for 9 long years, drawing in and grinding up the best troops in Stefan Amaris' army, and they did that despite the horrible losses in men and material, and on a shoestring that no other unit was able to sustain for more than a few weeks. Their story is one of dedication and perseverance, the story of true Star League Marines. And he's not wrong, because holy
He's
shit.
not wrong.
I mean, they're holding out for fucking 9 years.
They held out for 9 years, and I want to note this: they were under repeated attack. They sent basically Amaris sent people to Carver 5 that he didn't like specifically to die. Like,
And
holy
a lot
shit.
of those were actually people who just told him you're wrong, and they were right.
Yeah, like they held out. Yes, they did have for the last few years the campaign, the 3rd RCT with them, but still, that was a decent sized unit that was reinforcing them. But
They fought off armies multiple
but they were
times their
already fighting
size.
they were already fighting for what, 6 years before that alone, with like minimal resupply and probably like a small window of opportunity that they could do like assaults to open up the orbital corridor for resupply. Like, if you wanted to do a Battletech, like, I don't know if anybody at Catalyst would ever listen to this. If you wanted to do an interesting book about the American Civil War, it would be like a scenario book just about Carver 5, because there is so much excuse for combined arms operations from like
Dude, that
naval
would be. They should totally do a Carver 5 book because think of all the battle scenarios you can cook up.
Well,
Oh,
you can do
you can do a land. You can do mechs, tanks, aerospace,
Land, air, and sea
naval.
combat. Hell, hell, you could even be a psycho and do overspace conflicts where your submarines bomb and destroy their ships.
Yeah,
in
you could
space.
even have scenario. Yeah, you could easily have scenarios where you're doing like the submarines. You have to move your submarines into position against orbital assets, and other stuff. Like it would even be a decent like board game. Is like the Carver?
Yeah,
Would be like
this
the
could
Carver
be
5
their
campaign.
version of Necromunda, honestly.
Not really Necromunda.
No,
more like a strategic game. Where
Well,
it'd be
you
like
know what I mean, like a spin-off. You could totally do a really good spin-off on Carver 5. It's 10
Yeah.
years of a lot of cool shit.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you could easily do an entire campaign because it's like this is a naval training world, so this means that they would have almost every kind of warship you could imagine.
You could
So
also
you could have
sell.
carrier
You
operations.
could sell the models too. The models that you don't sell too easily too.
Yeah, like even like little miniature like Battletech style carriers would be really cool. Because
I'm pretty sure Iron Man
they could
has
take. Yeah, but like they could do like land air mech operations off of like conventional carriers, which would be radical as fuck.
Yeah.
That would be cool.
You could do you could use those battle mech landing ships and basically
for like raids and shit. Yeah, you could. It's a really cool little campaign, and it's barely talked about. It's I love it. It's just like this concept of like you can do almost anything you want with that. If you want to run an American Civil War game, it's a great excuse for custom mechs, which is that they're ones that are being demoed by the can. Like they're being tested out there because it's a major like special forces training base. So they're like, okay, we're going to test these new mech designs out for special forces or new.
The specialized mech design is designed to be capable of doing very shallow water expeditions with limited ability to retaliate in there.
Or more accurately, like we've got a hoplite variant where we're upgrading the weapon to like an LBX-10 autocannon and a few other like little shenanigans.
We have an experimental vehicle in hovercraft. Like we got experimental vehicles.
Hovercraft. That's the other thing. You get to throw a lot of hovercraft around because they move really, really well over water in Battletech. So so you can do like really crazy scenarios of like.
And your Franken-mechs, you can bust those out because basically, we had to scrounge between like five different models to make this thing.
Different models to make one working because while we've got spare supplies, they don't last forever. It's also a great excuse to throw in infantry. Like, how do you do infantry combat campaigns against mechs? Which could be really fun tactical scenarios where you're having to maneuver infantry squads that are concealed. Like,
shit, we got to bust out the agromechs now.
Yeah. Well, not really agromechs because I would assume it's more of like a fishing economy.
Still
which
fishing.
Could lead to some really fun stuff with like you
modified
have these
fishing
like
vehicles.
Yeah, modified fishing ships that are designed to fight like to be like little monitors or PT gunboats, like swift boats in Vietnam.
Like these fishing vessels that you hop on, you put on some hop on some short range missiles, maybe a small micro laser if you can put it on there, and then just dart around with it.
Yeah, there's a lot you could do with the Carver 5 campaign from like actual fleet battles where it's like, okay, you have warships engaging each other because Ameris is deploying like a naval force to try to take Quantico, and you've got your own carrier operations.
A carrier versus carrier duel.
A carrier versus carrier duel that like spaceships can't really interfere with because of the SDS system around Quantico. Like, there's a lot of really cool things you could do with this.
As a Maris, you take your battle fleet, your cruiser line or battleship line, and you have to try to pound the defenses around Quantico with them with their heavy batteries.
You have to like try to get while like the SLDF is having to run like carrier operations, like submersible carriers or whatever the fuck else. Like, go nuts! Like it's BattleTech. Just bring out all the cool shitty toys.
Slap on some fucking AC on a sub, have it pop out, open up, and just start blasting with its machine gun.
With a fucking autocannon? Yeah.
Well, let's
best
move on
page in the
to
book.
Best page in the book because it's just like.
So the rest of the
campaign. It's
yeah.
bloody. It's really bloody.
Kilborn,
But
not pretty. Lockdale, really not pretty.
by 2076, there are about 15 SDS Protector worlds to contend with, but they really are sustaining losses.
Yeah, because the SDS systems were designed to be incredibly difficult to crack.
So
They
their
It's so
next
bloody,
target,
they have to have another meeting. Carver
have
conference.
another meeting around Carver because Carver is it's really close to Earth. It's within 30. So
the
they're
next
looking.
planets are Epsilon, Iridani, and Pollux.
Yeah, which were also really nasty campaigns. Outreach was a really easy one. Graham and Procyon were fucking nightmares because the
both
Amaris
Amaris
decided that
and Star League knew whoever owns Procyon owns one of the key manufactories of the hegemony.
right. It's also that
Both
they
desperately need that world.
right.
And in focusing on these, they kind of left pretty much 5 other worlds: Kath, Key, New Earth, Regulus, and Cirrus, as well as Epsilon, Indy, Terra Firma, Thorin, and Zolkothin.
They're important,
alone.
but
They
nowhere near
can't.
as important as Procyon and Outreach and Graham.
Yeah, like Kath, Keed, New Earth, Kentaurus, and Cirrus are needed to be taken. We're gonna have to fight for those. Those are like the really close ones around Terra.
By the way, on
And
Procyon, in response to being faced with a losing scenario, the Amaris army legitimately just went full crazy and unleashed all of the WMDs on the planet.
yeah, a lot of the issues was like Graham was nuts when it came to WMD actions. Like there were a lot of nuclear strikes.
Because basically the commander said, "Oh, if we can't have
hold
this
the world, fuck you. We're gonna take as many of you as we can with us.
not just as many as you as possible, they aimed at everything: soldier units,
Yeah,
civilian centers, weapons complex, machine part plants, mech buildings. They hit everything as much as they could to destroy as like they didn't care. People dead, soldiers dead, their own dead, all of it dead. They built a tombstone with their names engraved on it.
Would be also a fun thing would be to break out like the Twilight 2000 rules, modify them for BattleTech, and run them on one of these worlds.
A Graham
oh.
4 scenario would be hilarious. Like you're
Graham,
just survivors.
You're just survivors trying to get to a place with food. Like there's a lot of options. I know that we're talking just kind of about the book, but like if you wanted to run an interesting game, I would use either like the Traveler rules or the Mech Warrior rules. You could easily do like a campaign just set in the aftermath of one of these invasions with a bunch of people trying to survive essentially a post-apocalypse.
And it's cool things that legitimately this book is great for scenario campaign ideas. Like a fun campaign idea is you have X number of terms on this world before the Mars troopers just start laying waste with it with nukes.
Yeah,
Try to save as much as you can.
Or you could do easily a Lance game where you're playing a group of SLDF like mech warriors that are isolated and have to get somewhere before the nukes start dropping. There's a lot of options, and because technically speaking, battle mechs are nuclear rated, they can survive intense radiation.
So your Lance is essentially behind enemy lines now after a concerted WMD strike basically wiped out
and you've got to fight your way back, trying to survive through basically Fallout.
Yeah.
Like that would be a fun little mini campaign if you wanted to do that, because it's like you're engaging against people that are dying of radiation poisoning, and you're probably getting radiation sickness yourself, and it's a race against time to get to your unit or probably die.
Again, these are just lovely idea scenarios, and these are criminally underused by Catalyst Labs because they are kind of idiotic.
Well, it's that they want to focus on the newer stuff, and I don't blame them.
Well, yeah, newer stuff. They need to make reasons for you to buy more new things.
And like the mercenary campaign and all that, and the shit sure around that, so on and so forth. CAF is also an interesting world to do a campaign on, because they talk about it in the starting on page 50.
I see it on fire.
They talk about CAF, the what was it? House of Pain, Cirrus, basically, but by as I said on page 56, I know I'm skipping that section, but
Half is
Um,
like incredibly bloody.
Yeah.
Mainly
Because here's
because
the
they're one of the few worlds that were seriously pro Amaris because they fucking hated the
they
cameras.
weren't. They weren't. This is the
Oh.
thing. The CAF was basically like almost any other world before and after, right? They didn't like Dicky. They were kind of like, oh, okay, we don't like the Camerons. And Amaris is kind of like they're kind of split on him. The Duchess is supporting him, but not all of it. And the Duchess is also like there's a lot of military folks who got killed. And there's a lot of people that weren't happy about that. So then there was this guy called Yang Timmons, mid-class worker, 20s, no government service, no military service, publicly cheers it, all this sort of stuff, apathetic. And there is a bit where there's a bit of time. There's a back alley brawl, kills 2 officers, right? Blamed on the Cath resistance, and there's a bunch of Yangs that die.
Including one of his sisters, and that makes Timmons, well, yeah.
Oh, Zen is saying
So
part of the terms
instead of,
Sorry.
but instead of going and joining the resistance to kill Amara's soldiers, he said no. The Duchess is the one that did this. So he goes out. By the way, I love this
Spends months
detail.
planning this.
He literally plans it in Minecraft.
He plans it in Minecraft. This has the same energy as one of the recent Smiling Friends episodes with the landlord, where he spent like nearly $1 million just to get Alan to play with him.
$720.
No, $750,000.
Smoke some weed and drink Diet Pepper soda and play Burnout Revenge on the PS2.
Legitimately just to get Alan to play a game with him while drinking diet soda.
So it's sort of like, so basically
Same energy.
he uses his he's not even an active resistance member. He's just hell bent on killing one woman. And so he plans it out, creates his plan. It's actually kind of brilliant.
He basically causes a bunch of electrical fires in the building.
Then pumps her suite full of electrical suppressant gas late at night, and triggering a bunch of electrical fires.
So it's
never formally tried.
So it's Acme's electrical suppressant gas?
Basically, yeah, like halogen.
The logic is simple. Electrical fires cannot be put out conventionally by water. They don't. They get worse.
Right. So
Same
the
with
thing
oil
you need to do is you need to pump in either carbon dioxide or halogen. Arguably, halogen won't kill you in small doses, but in this case, he probably overloaded the system to dump as much possible into a room.
Yeah.
He was killed. He was never formally charged, but he was tried, convicted, and executed within a month for treason and conspiracy to commit murder of officers of the Amaris Empire, which resulted in him becoming basically a rallying cry for the entire planet's resistance movement. Remember Yang.
Remember Yang, and then meanwhile you just see his plans. Just fuck this one bitch.
Literally,
in particular.
fuck this bitch in Minecraft.
Like, he doesn't even no cares about it. Just fuck this bitch in particular.
Yeah.
Zen has a point. Part of the terms for Catalyst's license are that they can't retcon the Jihad or the Dark Ages, and they have to continue developing the setting. Fair enough.
They're kind of stuck with that, but I will still say that they could have done Ilkhan so much fucking better.
I mean, that's not hard.
The other bit where they're talking about with the Cal
fighting hold on. Maybe part of the contract is Clan Wolf has to win.
Yeah, probably.
Oh god, that's pathetic.
Right. So the fighting on Calf is actually like
I loathe that sort of shit. Sorry.
Yeah, the fighting on Calf is actually really conventional because most of the fighting is actually not done with WMDs. There is a lot of Patriot formations, basically loyalists to Amaris, but most of the time is most of the fighting is like conventional, which is saying something. It's just really bloody and in mostly urban combat, which is just fucking nasty. CAF is a rather bloody affair, but it doesn't go.
It's mostly conventional, barring some initial WMD strikes during landing.
Yeah, and of course during the fights for the cities. Like they're mostly we're aiming for SLDF formations though, compared to actual like just
Compared to
civilian.
Graham, which was just kill them all, including ourselves.
Yeah. One of the more interesting ones where they get into the talk about like the space the Kid was kind of like a thing. There's the talk about the new Earth campaign. We get some fun art.
Cirrus.
We get some fun art that's actually chronologically wrong because there's a mech in here. Wait, no.
There's
Wait,
Yes.
is that a Black Knight?
there is a mech that's in here that should
there
not
is
be.
there is a Shogun there. I'm pretty
Oh.
sure that is not supposed to be there. I'm gonna
Nope.
have to double check that because I was like, is that a Mauler? I think that's actually a Shogun.
Oh, I like the 6-armed lizard.
Yeah, I like when they show alien wildlife. It's cute.
Yes, that is supposed to be a Shogun. I'm pretty sure,
Whoops.
but they it's hard to say because we see one in Tier 3050, but it doesn't quite look like that. I think that's what it's supposed to be. Otherwise, it's a Mauler, which should, but I don't see the Mauler. Let me take a look at the. Yeah, it doesn't have the Mauler launchers, but it does have the sort of the wings on some of these other like SLDF Aeromex. No, it's a Crockett. That's what it is.
Okay.
At least I'm pretty sure. Hold on.
So I believe.
I can't recognize it by heart, so I'm just
Yeah,
gonna take it.
no, it
And-
it is. Is it? Yes, it is. It's one of the OG Crockett designs from like Tier 3050. All right, makes sense.
So then there's Rigel Cantaris, there's Cirrus, and they're all bloody. Basically, by autumn of 2070-76, the hegemony's liberated, but the SLDF is at at 35% capacity.
Yeah.
65% of the Army and Navy have been destroyed or disbanded. So they're operating at 35% strength.
Yeah.
And 10% of those are garrison forces. So now they're down to just a quarter.
By the way, the New Earth was such a shit show.
Well, actually, no, 10% of 35. So.
New Earth was such a shit show for those curious that even in the start of the actual campaign setting, in what was it, 350? Like even at that stage, it hasn't recovered. Like it just basically.
A lot of worlds that are devastated in the Civil War never actually recover. The American Civil War is almost as destructive as the following.
Yep, first
Succession Wars.
Succession
The
War.
Succession Wars is just more widespread in its destruction. The American
Yeah.
Civil War is focused almost directly at the like high tech areas of humanity.
So,
the House of Pain.
Yeah, the House of Pain.
I was just skipping on to the Terran system.
Amaris induced downward spiral.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Rigel can't use W.
In less than a year, it plummeted in GDP by 25%. It continued. Oh God.
Well, that's what happens when you use a use of WMD attacks and setting up work camps and ghettos.
Yeah, that would do it.
Cirrus. Well, it's a methane planet.
Yeah, Cirrus,
guess what happens?
literally the major thing about Cirrus is that Cirrus has like a bunch of habdomes. There's actually a plot point in one of the what is it? The Grey Death Legion novels, the third one I want to say, where Comstar blames them for a terror attack on Sirius.
Pack it up, pack it in, let me begins.
Yeah, like they get once we get though to page 56, here we go. It is actually time for the fighting for Terra.
By the way, thank you.
But before the
no. Thank you for correcting me, Zen Gunman. It's 3025. Sorry, I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah, 3025 is the standard kind of like end of Succession Wars.
Now, Kerensky does give Amaris a chance at peace, sending a 500-word missive calling on Amaris and his forces to surrender to the SDLF and they be treated fairly, according to the Star League civil law. Amaris's response is a rambling, disjointed 150,000 words that doesn't even actually address his surrender. He likens Kerensky to Abaddon, the Angel of the Abyss, and accuses him of doing humanity to some unspecified but horrendous fate. Which is true.
Yeah, I mean, you
Oh,
have a bunch
he
of
claimed
Wolfaboo losers
Kerensky.
running
No, no, no,
Earth.
no. Here, he claimed Kerensky hid his true face from the universe and was in truth the devil, aided by an army of chimera with scorpion tails, the bodies of snakes, wolves' faces, and the wings of eagles.
Which is wrong because there's no actual eagles among the clans. This is a very, very important note. There is a falcon, and that's about it. Not an eagle.
He, however, is correct in that he is single-handedly responsible for a bunch of Wolfaboo losers to taking over Terra. Mainly because
Also,
the writers mandated that they win.
abandoning the inner sphere before the first succession war.
Yeah.
So he is kind of correct. He is the Angel of the Abyss.
Yeah, he's kind of single-handedly responsible for the absolute crap hole that the hegemony becomes, despite Blake's efforts.
I mean, no, that was mostly Amaris burning everything.
Look, I'm gonna say that at least 10% of the fault lies with Kerensky. Look, just because 90% of it was Stefan Amaris' fault. Technically, it's actually 100%, but like it takes the incompetencies. Okay, let us try to math it out because we have to go over 100% to blame everyone. Because you have to break math to really describe the level of how they fucked up.
All right. Anyway,
you have to like shove more than a whole pie into the pizza box to determine and show how bad they fucked up.
So, basically, they're all preparing up for
the
full-on invasion.
The plan.
Kerensky's address. Soldiers of the Star League. I have a few words to say before we begin. We've come a long way, my friends. From the far periphery to just outside home, we have fought battle after battle. We've seen our enemy fall before us. We've seen our friends die. Now tired, bloodied, and battered, we are about to enter a battle that many have said is impossible to win. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps freeing Terra from the usurper is humanly impossible. If it is, I'm not worried. I have long known that the men and women whom it has been my honor to command are more than just flesh and blood. They are the sum of their physical parts. An unalloyed spirit runs through you like the sparks and diamonds. It's hard to put this into words, but I look into the eyes of even the lowest ranked trooper. I see the Star League. And I know that the worth of the Star League lies in the fact that it gave birth to and nurtured men and women like you. Friends, it's time to go home. Godspeed to all of you.
And then exactly 1 year later on the day, fuck this shit, I'm out.
No, it's not even 1 year later. He left like about 6 years after. And he did give the Kerensky address, which is still a really good little bit of like lore where he's talking about like why we left and like the hope that we will be able to come back someday, and that
they did, and they were very embarrassing, and I hate them. And they were mandated by the writers to win, just like the writers in GW mandated Chaos to win. Fuck you. Fuck
so
you,
the Goer
EX.
is very interesting in time. They have to bring in 932 ships into a single system.
Yeah.
32 vessels jump in on the dot. They are then every 60 seconds there is a ship arriving within that sort of time. They are basically kind of like going through this. It's an incredibly dangerous fight in the system.
By the way, they open up by making sure that the ships were automated because they were expected to just fucking drop. The idea is unleash their cargo, which is where the drop ships were, and then just fucking run or die.
Fucking kamikaze. And
yeah.
So 60% of the dropships were destroyed.
Yeah, basically the plan was this. So we have 20 jumping jump ships we are putting in. These are 32 vessels. 12 are observers, which are going to be reporting back using HPGs. The other 20 were vessels modified with robotic controls. They're not expected to survive. The main thing they have, though, is 60 dropships under robotic control with enhanced armor and packed with explosives. They're fire ships, basically. Their entire job is to destroy the battle stations at the jump points. Because when you jump into system, unless you're using a pirate point, there's only two really stable points to jump into a system in Battletech. The apogee and the nadir, which is basically directly above and below the star, relative to the galactic plane. So with that in mind, you could defend both of these points, and it's a lot harder to get into system.
So I believe the 60% that were destroyed, these were just the kamikazes.
The one kamikaze struck at least
10 of the
these stations. So they struck most of the stations. 6 of them were destroyed, meaning 4 were badly damaged. And then warships launch in to do this. The Caltrop constellation is this planetoids that were gathered at the drum point, which then created a bunch of problems for like navigation in and out.
Basically, what Amaris did before we do, and the reason they did the kamikaze fire ships was specifically because Kerensky, for some reason, thinking that Amaris wouldn't just nuke Earth. I mean, come on, man.
Well, no, his main thing was he wasn't expecting him to nuke these little planetary bodies, like these like small ice asteroids that are around the jump point.
Well, no. Like, you're combining the two. So he didn't expect the Caltrops because they weren't there. Amaris put them in. What I was talking about is the reason he didn't use nuclear arms to destroy those space stations was...
No, he did. All those dropships were equipped with nuclear warheads.
No, they aren't. It says right fucking here, equipped with conventional explosives.
I thought that they were...
No. Kerensky legitimately told Grek to not use them.
So that they would...
Grek recommended it because it would guarantee knock them out, but Kerensky wanted to avoid having Amaris just get any excuse possible to just glass the entire solar system. Because he would. He would.
Fair enough.
Despite the Caltrop constellation, only 18 of the 932 ships suffered malfunctions that prevented their jumps. Dozen completed jumps that suffered damage. Only 1 was lost, and that was due to the Richardson and the Mississippi Queen arriving in the same space and interpenetrated.
So the reason
jump
is...
accident.
So here's what... Amaris's idea was to do something really cutesy, which was to put defensive networks near those 2 jump points. The problem is that still leaves a lot of space, so it didn't work like he wanted it to. It slowed him down a little bit, but nowhere near as much as he was wanting.
It still took 5 hours to get in. 4 squadrons jumping into each jump point every 5 minutes, so it took an hour and 30 for all those vessels to arrive. Absolutely insane. That's a lot of ships.
Page 60 shows us what that space battle looks like.
Yeah, it's an absolute fucking nightmare show.
Oh my god, I love it because I see a lot of Zeta. I see a lot of Zeta and OG Gundam refits. You also see a squiggly. I also see a squiggly. Is that a Magellan or is that supposed to be a Salamis?
It gives me some Star Wars vibes.
No, these are not Star Wars ships though. These are clearly from Gundam, but repainted.
I said but vibes like.
Oh, it's lovely. I wish that their space battles were actually not a complicated nightmare because I think a Battletech space battle series would be fun.
Yeah, the main issue is Task Force Leonidas. Basically put, this is the group that is assigned to deal with the SLDF system, the SDS system.
Yeah.
These are the men that are going to die.
It's a suicide mission. There is basically it's 40 of the best warships they have, and they are authorized to use nukes.
This is what you were confusing. Yeah. Basically, by any means, they needed to break this.
They need to break through. It was basically like a 6-hour fighting.
The result of which is 106 drones, 40% of those deployed in the Terran system.
By the way, the drones were, looks like, I'm just kind of skimming. The drones feel like it's an Amaris design thing. Basically, they were using them for defense.
I think we saw those in the last book.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. So while there were a lot of others that are going through, the SLDF is getting pressured in the system, but they're able to bait the drones out and start to annihilate them slowly, grind them out.
The run to Terra costs the SLDF 196 warships, 27 transports, and 18 divisions perish in their dropships.
Which
they lose almost 100,000 troops.
It's nasty, but it's less than they were expecting to lose.
They were expecting to lose.
They were expecting 50% casualties on the approach.
they finally breached Terra at J hour plus 179 hours.
Yeah, if you're
Yeah.
wondering, Kerensky was expecting at least 500,000 dead just in this opening stage.
So that's good.
Yeah.
Then comes the other parts of the battle.
Which is cracking
Luna.
their way to the Luna, because Luna
They
is
cracked their
heavily
way
defended.
into
They cracked their way to
onto
Luna. Then there's Venus, which
with
is
the star laser.
I love it.
which because it was not designed to, instantly fucking shatters.
You come here to try to evict me from my throne world, Kerensky, but unfortunately for you, I have my giant shark laser. Oh,
Yeah.
it just exploded. God damn it.
The funniest bit about this is
I killed all of Venus for nothing then.
202 million people lived on Venus, and there was under 10,000 by this Fourth Succession War, and it was finally abandoned in 3061. The last inhabitants were actually parts of the Word of Blake that were.
So here's the
trying to live.
thing: Venus wasn't killed in a day. This wasn't. Basically, what happened was to build it.
Climate change.
To build it, they built essentially a
needed solar
reverse
shield,
Dyson
yeah.
sphere. A reverse Dyson sphere to
a sun
absorb
shield,
and
basically.
deflect. Yeah. So him doing this wasn't going to cook Venus instantly.
It was a slow death.
He condemned one of the because this was the luxury world too. Like they turned it into a tropical paradise.
Venus was legitimately a tropical paradise because it was like it's nearly Earth size. It had similar gravity. It had a nice atmosphere that they could use to terraforming.
It was always sunny because it had a slow rotational period.
It was great.
And then the shield goes away, and
the
people
shield goes
start
away,
realizing,
die. Yeah,
it's hotter out here all of a sudden.
Oh no, it takes time. It took years for the first temperature rise, like notable temperature rise.
Yeah. Then there were terraforming efforts on Mars as well. The Amaris
fun fact: scientists have actually started to think that it would actually be easier to terraform Venus than Mars, mainly because Venus's thick atmospheric envelope actually kind of serves as an ozone layer. So while it's a volcanic shithole that can melt lead instantly on contact with the ground,
if we can cool it down a bit.
If you can cool it down a bit and get rid of the sulfuric acid in the atmosphere, you got a lot to work with. Mars, on the other hand,
swing in some of the oceans, but I mean, you can at least live on the surface.
Mars, on the other hand, is in a nuclear desert.
Arguably, the best way to fix Mars is you have to somehow jumpstart the core again, probably with nuclear weapons.
Which is funny because it's also a radioactive desert, so it's fine.
Yeah. But yes, the Belters were also, they talked about this, the Belter population in the Star League era. Basically, these small colonies around the Jovian moons and the asteroid belts, who were basically rebelling against Amaris the entire time.
Oh, no. There's a touch I want to in the first intense radiation belt. They actually got that right. Jupiter is well known for its very thick radiation belts. It is actually to the point where, like, the Jovian moons are commonly considered potential landing points, like Europa, for example. But the biggest problem is Europa is within its radiation zone. So what you would have to do first is go to Callisto, or I think Ganymede. I think both of them are just barely out of the heaviest parts of the belt.
Titan is, I think, the best candidate.
Also, hypothetically, since Titan has lakes of methane,
because we know it has an atmosphere.
No, since Titan has lakes of methane,
it's a relatively large moon.
It also has liquid water because we have
it has liquid on it. I think, yeah, it has liquid water. It has liquid. Yeah, it has liquid on it, not liquid water.
Which means that you could actually have interesting life forms. Funnily enough, a really fun idea you can play with on Titan life forms is gigantic South Ocean creatures.
Also floating creatures. You gotta remember, it's got a decently thick enough atmosphere that you could have, and a low enough gravity that you could have relatively large, like,
imagine, I guess you could call them, like, sky skimmers. Imagine siphonophore, like, that's a type of undersea.
Basically, imagine an anomalocaris. That flies around, that's floating around, like, with really long wings, and that might be something that could live on Titan.
Legitimately, you could strap wings on yourself on Titan and fly around with it.
Fly around, yeah. Kind of great. So they even talk about Titan. Titan was the most important because it's got an atmosphere. All this, there's a lot of projects that were done, but it didn't quite work out. The terraforming operations didn't work out the best, but it was in fact a massive shipyard.
Yep. That's a nod to Star Trek because Utopia Planitia actually built their dockworks around Mars's orbit.
And then
Yeah.
Mercury. which is a
Mercury as well.
research.
Yeah, research station on Mercury.
It became a
I love that they describe each of the worlds. This is.
It's nice little details, isn't it? Where they're talking about here's how they go through the system.
Also, you know what this kind of shows you? How you can have high intensity brutal war without losing embarrassingly to space Afghanistani. That's the only thing I remember from Operation Klondike, honestly.
And now it's time for the real fun,
Right?
Which is how the fuck are we going to get onto Earth?
Because
and I love there's actually a little bit of short fiction about this because it's a really fun detail where they talk about the fact that the first you know how like the Clanners have the elementals, right? The power armor suits and all that sort of stuff. Those are the descendants of a little bit of some SLDF projects, which were also inherited by Comstar. They're called the Nighthawk suits. They're very basic powered armor that if you see a picture of like for example, the bounty hunter in universe, he has one of these rare power armor suits. They gave them to a group of commandos when they're approaching Earth, because of course there's all these automated defense systems. To create a defensive network to get through, they basically launched a group of commandos down into atmosphere to make to clear out an SDS system to allow a gap basically to open.
Also, there was at least this did not happen. Kerensky did fear that Amaris would literally just use space junk to trap Terra.
Yeah.
That is something. By the way, that's a nod to Kessler syndrome, which is something that we are concerned about as poorly placed satellites continue to decay in orbit and rip apart because of gravitational influence. You run the risk of higher and higher chances of what are known as micrometeor impacts from just debris like lost wrenches, screws, damaged paneling. This is genuinely something that might potentially lock us onto the planet if we don't clean it out. Or manage the systems better. Amaris doing this is well within his character. You saw what the fuck he did to Graham 4. You saw what the fuck he did to Venus. So him deciding to spite everyone by essentially locking Earth behind rubble and letting it fall apart, well within his character.
I actually see him do this. Said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to prevent Kerensky from invading us. We are going to blow up the sun.
We must go to the only place the Cameronism hasn't touched. Space!
That would be great. That would be great.
I have to do the head nod.
James McEvedy in the 331st
Actually,
Minnesota.
No, you say this, but legitimately, the dark comedy is I think it would have made more sense for the Clanners to be descended from fucking Amaris.
There was actually some speculation about that, I think, in one of the books where they're talking about, are these remnants from the Civil Wars? Like, what's going on when they were invading at first?
I think that would have been better. I think that would have made more sense.
But I love this where it's like, believe me, Amaris will try to throw every soldier he can at the LZs. He'll build a wall of bodies to dishearten us and protect his own skin. He will not succeed.
Yeah.
This is the 331st, the Minnesota Division, known because it was literally, its emblem was literally Minnesota, the state of Minnesota. Which
they were
is
eventually
also
all put to death.
Yeah, they became the foundation of Clan Wolverine, and they did escape. They fled into the inner sphere and became the Minnesota tribe, which is a little detail of the setting, and made their way around the sphere and then to the other side of humanity. So no one knows where they are, but they went beyond where like the Taurians are and all that. There's some speculation they're still out there because of some recent fiction.
So they finally land.
It took 40% casualties of the fighters because they're trying to hit the SDS sites in low orbit.
Yep.
See, so they saw that the fighting was going to be fiercest in North America.
Mainly because that's where the more important infrastructure was set up.
That's where the palace was.
Yep, that.
Yeah, Geneva, Germany, Russia, China. Initial plans were 4 landing points: Berlin, Moscow, Beijing, and New Delhi.
The second riskier strategy was to spread them out across areas. Eventually, they decide for a slightly different strategy.
They ended up with minimal opposition in the first wave, which, Amaris, what the fuck?
Well, the idea
It's
was that they were
interesting.
going. Well, the main issue was not to group them out, so that they can't be assigned to strategic weapons fire. Hopefully, and
Yeah, that's
also
why
that
they didn't do the 4 landing. They could have, but
yeah,
they were
but it would
concerned
have
about that.
basically been nuke stuff. So they were spreading out, which was the other bit with that is that way they can use their orbital control to hit whatever launches.
So as we can see, 15th landed in the UK, 10th
Yeah, I
lands
love
in
this little map.
Germany, 5th
'Cause-
lands in France, 18th lands Switzerland, 6th goes to Italy, 1st goes to Spain, and the 17th and the 11th head to Russia.
Yeah. By the way, there is a Battle of Odessa.
No, before you do, you know what I really like about this map? St. Petersburg is its own country.
Yeah, it's organized into their own districts. Like there's a lot of like talk about
England has been deprived of Wales.
Wales and Scotland are independent districts. So is Northern Ireland. What the fuck?
Oh no!
Also, the Benelux is one unified nation, aside from
Luxembourg of all places.
Luxembourg.
Also, the
Oh, wait, did they
Libyan
miss- and they
Egyptian
missed-
fusion.
Yugoslavia exists.
No, wait, hold on. They also changed the name of Brussels. It's now Bruxelles.
No, that's French.
That's the
French term.
French pronunciation of it.
It has an X in it?
Also, the capital
Yes.
of the German district is Bochum. Oh, sorry, that is the
Fuck
that's
you,
the Castle
Berlin.
Brian. That's the Castle Brian.
Oh,
Never mind.
I thought it
My
was-
bad on that.
They're saying,
Like there's
screw
one
you,
in Cairo
Berlin.
as well.
Also, check it out. Look, Israel succeeded in the 6 day.
Greater Palestine has existed.
Greater Israel.
Greater Israel, yeah, right.
L'chaim.
Also, the Egyptian-Libyan fusion. Also, Tunisia, Morocco, and Algeria fusing is pretty
These
funny.
might be like assigned districts of like governmental districts. I mean,
Yeah,
for
because
Star League purposes, they talk a little bit about this.
I think Montenegro is separate.
Yeah, they talk about this where it's like Earth at this point was around 12 billion population.
Yep.
Actually, Earth in BattleTech is only about 6 billion. Right. Well, now. Similar countries we refer to here aren't nations as we understand them today. They are Terran administrative districts that form a discrete governmental block, sometimes with as many European nations corresponding with historical states, but other times splitting larger ones into smaller ones. And most of these are essentially autonomous regions within the government. Like they have a lot of control over their own affairs. So it's more like this is your big district. Like it's probably going to be split up into smaller districts, but for general use, we're going with this is one big district. So moving on with that, but yeah, here's where they talk about the Operation Liberation, where usually they talk about the George S. Patton Division as the first one to land, which is true for large-scale divisions, but Special Forces commands were the first ones to actually go through.
Yep, 11 of those teams.
Yeah, 11 teams went through. There were 6 that went through shuttle. There were others that were doing basically Halo ODST insertations.
Oh, yeah.
For example, one man who escaped his ablative platoon at 40,000 meters up, basically doing a Halo drop at the speed of sound. Like at like Mach 2, you're trying to hit the ground. So they made it their way to the Austria-Germany complex, breached 3 layers of fences without triggering alarms, penetrated the 4th rim. 2 members were killed. 6 managed to assault the final. And remember, these are guys in power armor, basically. Like this is completely nuts. Yeah, proto-elementals.
Oh, by the way, out of the 11-man team, only 2 of them survived, but because of the way that these bases were constructed...
8-man teams, actually.
8-man teams. 6 of them died by the end of this, but because of the way the bases were designed, as soon as they sealed off the network tunnels, they were basically unmolested. They were able to casually dismantle the rest from there.
Yeah, they basically they sealed the access tunnels, got into the base's defenses, shut off the batteries, and basically the 2 surviving members, I think the short story talking about them, they find the fucking basically like the Hitler Palace style of like T-top shit I wouldn't be surprised if
It's
the
a nod
joke
to
was
the
that,
eagle's nest, yeah.
yeah, the Eagle's Nest, where they're just hanging out there. They're like watching the landings coming in,
It
like
was a former tea house, so they're just like sipping on the best materials.
they're like popping the champagne as they're watching their guys come in. Like, we're gonna have to do a lot more fighting, and we hope they get here before they figure out how to breach the doors. But we got them down here.
Also, since the way that this works, you know that they've already shoved like several expensive vintages into their pant pockets or into their suits so that they can
Yeah.
sell them later.
The 331st Battle Mech Division, which is the North America division, basically it was one of the Royal Guard divisions. They changed their emblem to a state somewhere in North America. So like it would be called the Alberta Division for a while or whatever else. Sometimes, from what I remember, it was Minnesota was the last one that took its battle moniker for.
So they launch. This is in Moscow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the battle for
They
Moscow is kind of basically there's a landing around Kiev. There's another landing around Moscow. Which are
Moscow
important.
is relatively like it's a battle, but it's mostly terror tactics. And this is when they first realized what the fuck Amaris did to Terra.
Yeah, there's a lot of like resistance units kind of pop up and kind of like stand out, and they kind of give ideas what's going on.
Within 7 years, even before bombs landed onto, like even after all of those years, Amaris let conditions in Russia decline to the point where basic services were not working anymore.
Yeah, basically
so-
just to
so-
spite Kerensky, but to be
oh wait,
honest,
wait, really?
it's just modern Russia.
Yeah, that's what
just
it's like. Nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. Da comrade, in the 20th century, Russia shall be the same as it is today.
No, I'm envisioning Kerensky lands down after Moscow is taken, and he's like, it's exactly as I remember it.
It's like the fucking Scary Movie 4 joke, the one really good joke in that fucking movie, where it's like this is Detroit before the alien, like this is Detroit after the aliens landed, and here's Detroit before the aliens landed. It's the same thing. It's just that there's now the tripods, like there's building on fire everywhere.
I just, like I said, I see Kerensky landing down. He looks at the destruction. Like you have some soldiers from the North American divisions going, they've done so many, and he's like, no, it's just like I remembered it. He says, smiling, we're home.
Yeah, he manages to meet up with his wife and children there. The 11th Army consolidates their hold, move into the Urals in Poland, link up with 17th Army in Kiev. Basically they also meet up with elements of the army that had landed in Kazakhstan. Major problems, though, that they had was the St. Petersburg Erks and the Murmansk and Arkhangelsk were two very strategic locations. 2-week siege of Arkhangelsk would eventually led it to surrender, while Murmansk held for 6 weeks.
And now Kiev and the Ukraine.
The Ukrainian district, basically.
No, the Ukraine.
I know they used the Ukraine, but this is
Yeah.
published in 2013, so.
Yes.
Oh yeah, there is something I would like to note, because this is again a nod to Gundam, actually.
There is a battle around Odessa, yes.
No. Legitimately, the first landings of Xeon were on and in Russia, actually.
I thought it was North America.
Nope. Baikonur Cosmodrome was their target, and then they moved west to take Odessa.
Yes, the
second landing drop was America.
Yeah, so basically this is kind of interesting. When they approached Kiev, it's mostly the mechanized infantry division, though there were a few others kind of going on. Most of the local militia instead just surrendered.
Oh yeah, most of them gave up because conditions were that shitty. It's only the ones that were involved in the horrendous.
Mostly it was the Amaris supporters that were really doing it. The most interesting thing is that there were a few attempts to escape across the Dnieper by militia units. Didn't go too well for them. By the 10th of February, they basically hold the entire thing. There's a bunch of evidence of pre-planned defenses, but just nobody wanted to fucking fight.
No one wanted to die for Amaris because, yeah.
It was, the Mykolaiv faced a much bloodier offensive, so they basically
is a nod to the naval dockworks the Soviet Union had there.
That was the thing. The principal objective was to take that and the port city of Odessa. However, the 422nd Amaris Dragoons, Cavaliers were built after Darien. The fighting there were
because Darien was a bloodbath. They were wiped too.
Yeah, and
they had
trying to fight it. Basically, put it was a really bloody fucking action where they're fighting until basically into Odessa. And there were a fun tactic that was also used on Carver 5 by Amaris troops, which was that Amaris troops would seize civilians and just chain them onto their mechs.
By the way, Kerensky's
Wait,
response.
wait, what?
Yes, they would use.
They'd chain them onto their mechs and weapons emplacements.
Basically, the South Park Operation Human Shield.
Yeah.
Oh no, I remember that like one comic of that like fat guy taping babies to
one guy taping a bunch of babies to himself. Yeah.
By the way, Kerensky's response was, "Are you fucking kidding me? Keep firing anyway."
Like we just we
because
have to kill,
he hated it, but he's like, "Fuck you! We're not letting you pull this shit off. We're not gonna let these. We're not gonna let you fucking use this as a tactic."
So this is like a fun one. So basically, Darius was forced to send a portion looping north around the lakes that anchored the northern flank. The 2 regiments of the mechs submerged themselves in the Black Sea. So they basically went and did an amphibious operation into the ports of Odessa, and then fought by street fighting for about 2 weeks. No quarter was asked or given, and it would fighting would continue until about 14th of March, by which several districts were in ruins. However, the task force was able to secure most of the coast of the Black Sea around themselves, along with the Sea of Azov.
And because they fought to the last man, they stupidly forced the defenses to crumble, which meant that they also took Bucharest. Basically, their overcommitment to Odessa allowed them to sweep even further outward.
Right. Then there was the 279th and 68th Infantry Divisions, which their job was to take the Sertovolsk Castle Bryan. It was a nightmare.
Yeah, they eventually take it 11 months later.
Yeah.
Yeah, they noticed.
Losses were light. Now, most of the thing was that they managed to bottle them up in the Castle Bryan and basically just let them wait it out. I thought that this was the really bloody one, but no, there's another Castle Bryan. I'm pretty sure that is really bloody. I don't remember which one it was.
Next up is Berlin, which is being taken by the Erwin Rommel division.
Ironic twist of fate.
Why the fuck are you naming it after Erwin Rommel?
Because he was able to write his own fucking legacy.
The one good German, okay?
Seriously, the asshole had a chance to rewrite his legacy.
He wrote his own legacy and basically papered over anything he could have done wrong, and then also died by suicide.
Yeah, didn't he?
Yes.
Yeah, didn't he have to kill himself?
Yes, he did. He basically he was linked to the plot to kill Hitler. He didn't actually have anything really to do with it.
He barely had anything to do with it.
He was like,
he was just
like maybe, like I don't really care, like whatever, because he didn't report him, but he didn't like.
He was also a crybaby who wanted a more active command repeatedly.
Yeah, because
even though he was a hyper-aggressive retard. Like, here's the funny thing, Rommel. The reason he was so successful was British battle doctrine that he dealt with in North Africa primarily dealt with the assumption that you had the forces to continue an aggressive pace like that. Like, they assumed he had more units than he actually had.
And he exploited the fuck out of that.
In reality, the moment Bernard Montgomery came in, he changed how they worked their defense, took one look at his tactics, pushed him, and then he collapsed like a bitch, and he was able to keep moving.
Yeah.
And as for his the Catherine Pat, Lloyd Fredenhall was an idiot.
We need to go through a heavily defended pass because it's on the map. That's what I was told to do.
That's literally they're completely green.
They could have gone a different direction. It would have delayed them by like 2 days, but they could have taken a different path.
Like, legitimately, Lloyd Fredenhall was an idiot, and the U.S. troops that he was leading were completely green. That is the only reason it was remotely a disaster.
But
Rommel got to write his own victories because he is most remembered for being a guy who sulkily ignored orders to drive on regardless, ignoring tactical commands in France, only being saved by the fact that France was too busy crumbling since they had no active reserves at that point. Nearly getting his head blown off at least 3 times, and then sitting like a bitch in front of a wall and then killing himself because Hitler told him to. But
well,
he got to write his legacy.
Was that if he didn't kill himself, his entire family would be brought out and put on trial.
Yeah.
So
he got to write his legacy though, as a result, mainly because we needed the Germans to fight the Soviets.
Yep. Anyway.
Also, I'm pretty sure he wasn't actually like a Nazi.
No, he didn't really care. Like,
He didn't
who
care.
was
He
in
was just a
charge,
standard German
but
nationalist militarist.
but he was a German nationalist through and through for sure, and so he didn't really have any opposition
He
to the
gave
Nazis
no
either.
He gave no fucks if like, oh
Like, he
no, a
wasn't
ghetto
like,
of
oh,
Jews
he wasn't.
disappeared. I don't
Yeah,
care.
whatever. I don't care.
Ah,
It's
A
not
lot
that
of
he
the
was like an
generals
ardent
don't
Nazi,
care.
but it's also more like he just wasn't like saying, "Oh, the Nazis are bad." He's more like, I don't give a shit.
Yeah, like legitimately, a lot of the generals
Whatever.
just
They're
didn't
making
care.
They're making Germany great again. I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
so
clean hands myth
German
is a big
invasion.
fucking line.
German invasion. Major clash between SCLF and Terran forces at Potsdam.
Yeah. Also around Silo, as well.
Yeah.
Silo Heights. Yep.
By 20th of February, the assault in Berlin was nearly complete.
They're recreating the Soviet assault in Berlin, essentially.
Yeah. So basically, it's a recreation of that. They end up taking over, I believe, the castle by May.
Yeah.
May 10th, ironically.
Battle for Berlin had taken actually longer than expected. They mostly because they got bogged down in the suburbs.
They got bogged
Patriot
down in the
units
suburbs,
were-
and also there was a pocket that was particularly stubborn.
London
Yeah.
and Sandhurst.
This is actually a really fun one.
Oh, also the Castle Bryan in Germany, because I want to talk about it because it's kind of cute. It's known as the Kobold Works because it's named after the legendary fairy from German myth.
Yeah,
That's
the
cute.
Kobold Murderman and Flight of Saying the Sound would now be known for its bad luck. During the good years of the Starleague, the base was actually a significant part of the local business. The main problem,
Oh,
though,
by the
is
way,
that now...
the Kobold Works was one of the bloodier Castle Bryans, actually.
Yes, because they had to fight their way into the fortress. It was
and they
a lot of...
also, since it was the R&D site, a lot of their prototype weapons were there. So basically, they would just take experimental lasers arrays or even experimental mech models and just kind of throw them into the meat grinder.
Vigorous and proactive defense. So yeah, this was a bit of a bloodier one.
So with London and
It took
Sandhurst,
3 weeks to root them out. London and Sandhurst is a really fun one because it's like this. All right, 15th Army, the commander of 15th Army basically has this this idea, which is that the major problem is that Sandhurst is a major thing. We need to take the Sandhurst Castle.
Which is a nod to the military academy, which
well, it's because there is a military academy there still in Battletech,
in real life,
and also because it's the major base of operations for European Strategic Command. So 15th Army, they have to take London's 4 spaceports. They have to take Heathrow, military base.
There's a lot of tactical targets in a very narrow area. So
and the channel tunnels also have to be sieged. All of their objectives or secondary castle has to be taken or destroyed. So the number of troops is committed here is larger than anywhere else. To give you an idea, 13 divisions are in the 15th Army. 3 divisions are secure in the Channel Tunnel, Pas-Calais, and the Low Countries. The Sandhurst Task Force is twice the size that assigned to Berlin and the Ruhr.
So the way to get to the castle is this. We're going to drop 4 regiments of mechs in ablative cocoons to weather the barrage from the anti-air forces, and basically just
we need to secure a bioweapons facility as well. Yeah. So the really nuts thing is, so they basically go like, we're dropping them from orbit, dropped onto the there. They're going through the casualties are like less than 2 companies killed, so roughly 24 mechs destroyed.
It was light casualties despite the air defense, but because of the air defense, a lot of them got dropped off. First wave actually got nearly succeeded, but bounced off. Second wave had to go in to bail them out.
Right. So I love this, by the way. They landed at the shooting range of the academy.
Oh yeah, because the academy was at least partially taken. The Fusiliers were rallying by this point, however.
Yeah.
So the second one lands right on the shooting range.
So the assault became a meat grinder. SDLF taking the worst of it, to the point where 2 divisions were disbanded.
Yeah, they were incredibly mauled. This is where I was talking about like the complex. Days became weeks, and they just could not do it. So eventually, the SLDF just destroyed the communications arrays, but they just couldn't get them out.
Yeah, because Sandhurst was
just started,
stubborn. Yeah,
I love this, by the way. They just started bombing the fuck out of it
to the point where even by the 3090s, evidence of the bombing is still remaining.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sandhurst Castle. This castle, Brian, was the hardest one to take.
50,000 dead.
Which is saying a
Badly
lot,
damaged
but
complex.
the dark irony is because they, again, this is kind of a point with Amaris's desperate defense things that they did. This made the outside units that were guarding Heathrow and London actually try to basically pincer, but the problem was the landings kept going, and because they left defensive works, they were pretty quickly smashed. So hilariously, Heathrow was actually easily taken compared to Sandhurst.
Yeah.
There was heavy fighting in London between the mercenaries.
Yeah,
and...
London was still a meat grinder, but they were able to get control over the spaceport
between mercenaries and the Amaris Lancers.
Yeah, the mercenaries eventually basically defected
because they realized that if they didn't, they'd be killed.
And then the channel was taken like clockwork.
Yeah,
it's
no
mostly Sandhurst that was a failure.
Right.
Madrid, Iberia, began a cautious push. Pro-Amaris garrison had fled south.
So, funnily enough, northern Spain very quickly surrendered.
By the way, the ones that landed in Spain, the Hannibal division, 164th
Battletech. That's trying too hard. Come on. You know what I would have? You know what would be funnier?
I love this.
They should have named it the Wellington division. Actually, they should have named it after the Duke of Wellington.
By the way, the Greenhaven Gestapo are on the next page fighting in Italy. You can see the little SS on the mech.
Oh, come on!
Yeah. Oh shit! This is the one that I used for part 1. Actually, this is the thumbnail I used for part 1.
It's a great little image. I love it. It's a bunch of crabs, and I think that's an ostpod of some kind.
Yeah. If you're wondering, I zoomed in on the crab.
It's a Ravager. It's fun. It's great.
I zoomed in on the crab. I didn't see the fucking Schutzstaffel fucking bars. I would have zoomed in on him if I knew that.
It's Xeon. It's 2 Xeon symbols.
It's 2 Xeon symbols. It's okay.
Seek Xeon.
Again, fun fact. Again, Guerin legitimately, when he was compared to Hitler by his father, said, "It sounds like Hitler was a great man," because he had no context for why he led Germany to disaster.
Wait. When is the Universal Century supposed to take place?
Well over a century after World War II. Like, at least a century and a half.
How? Is Xeon education that bad?
Yes.
It's because World War II is so... Because by that point, World War II is kind of like, oh yeah, the 7 years war. Like, who gives a shit? It's like the war of the Austrian succession. It's the war of the Spanish succession. That's kind of what they were seeing it as.
Like Spain.
Also, it was written by a Japanese guy. You know how they are. You know how they are when it comes to World War II Nazi aesthetics. They don't have the context that the West does with the Germans in that time period.
So But yes, they talk about the Iberia pushing. It's one of the easiest campaigns of the war.
Well, of course, they were on siesta.
Oh no! Legitimately, it's mainly because most of the militia had no support.
They're like, fuck this. The major problem they had was the weather, because there were blizzards, so they had to return to base.
And then
basically, the only parts of Spain that actually remotely fought back was the south, and even then, it was pretty sporadic.
Not really. It was literally just
in the sense that they didn't instantly surrender. They gave a couple of wimpy pot shots and then just fucking gave up.
And then they just kind of it was small scale operations to capture suspected militants. It's literally like they just landed in Spain and are like, oh, this is easy.
And a lot of this is because, remember, they shot the Pope.
Yeah,
so a lot of the Catholic world was not particularly inclined to aid Amaris after that.
There was also a
lot of churches and cathedrals were probably destroyed.
I like this too. So the landings were actually north of Naples, which had been rebuilt after an eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 2604. The problem was that advancing south was a fucking nightmare due to the Greenhaven Gestapo.
Because basically Naples is now full of factions and gang warfare.
Full on gang warlords and shit. Like they were having fun there. The mercenaries were going nuts.
Yeah, you know what this makes me think of? I want a Battletech version of Romeo and Juliet.
Actually, can we have Amaris period Naples as the Necromunda equivalent, where you just make your gang, fight to the death to get more money from the Greenhaven Gestapo?
because the SLDF is like they've lost about 1,000 troops within the first week, half fatal. But the main reason for that was because they were trying at first to do just infantry action because they're like, we don't want to wreck most of the city, and we want to minimize the amount of targets for gang warfare. So like the good thing was that once they deployed armor, mechs casualty rates went way down, but then gangs ganged up to attack like battle mechs and shit. Which,
yeah. And
you
these
know,
gangs were intentionally farmed for their most bloodthirsty members because, again, the guy running this Legos, the Greenhaven Gestapo, he's a complete sociopath who basically was evil maxing. He wanted to go, okay,
Evil
I want
maxing.
I want you
Speaking of which-
guys to kill each other for my amusement, and then if they're not entertaining, he just has them get tortured to death in a horrible way. Like, he basically farmed them for their most brutal shit.
yeah, speaking of which, they talk a little bit about mercenary units. So something to note. Mercenary units were a long time part of the Amaris Empire, as we talked about. They hired a bunch of them, but they were also used by the SLDF.
For numbers, they
do
needed them.
right. The one of the
And
things that isn't
that's
talked
why
about, I think
Naples
it's
was a
the-
shit
I
show
think it's like
because
the
they would take.
There's like a fighting on Sicily was done by a mercenary unit, if I remember correctly.
It was. I was just also pointing. This is also why Naples was a shit show. Like, because
Yeah.
what would happen is these mercenaries would basically turn tail and basically play games.
Yeah, for example, others were basically just we're getting paid and we're fighting for getting paid. It's like the Burning Tigers and the Warriors of the Dawn and Team Q. Those three mercenary units. If you wanted to do your dudes in this era, you can easily be an Amaris Empire mercenary unit or an SLDF mercenary unit.
Yep.
Where like the SLDF needs extra troops for fighting in a campaign. There's your dudes.
Also, on top of this, Italy was mismanaged so poorly that
Yeah.
every city they took, they basically had to do massive martial law warrants.
They had to bring in
searches,
martial
and
law.
seizures.
Yeah.
It was painful to rip them apart.
That's mostly fighting against the Greenhaven Gestapo. The people were like, "Oh, thank God!"
No, the
they're
people
fucking
loved
gone."
it, but like because of the way that he didn't run things. He basically did it for his own amusement. You had to basically get rid of the warlords, the gangsters, mobsters, mercenary units that were playing at that sort of stuff. You basically had to do a massive anti-corruption and police action each time with each inch of territory you took.
Yeah. Most importantly, though, were the divisions assigned to take Geneva, because Geneva, technically speaking, was the capital of the entire Star.
Oh no, you forget the best part when the Gestapo just started gassing. They started gassing.
Yep. They started using gas, so the warships started firing.
They even had when they were surrendering, they wore explosive suicide vests.
Yes, they did.
Yep. The fighting in Geneva is actually a really interesting section here, because they're talking about the fact that like the primary objectives are various battalion training areas for fighting cadets, and they're talking a bit about like the fact that they were fighting basically child soldiers.
Oh no!
Yeah,
it's Amaris. What do you expect?
But that's a fun Gundam thing. Hello, yes, you are a child soldier fighting these invaders from the evil SLDF Empire.
Magda?
Yeah.
Basically, Amaris created his own version of the Hitlerjugend.
Yeah.
And then gave them explosive suicide vests and other things to crawl on mechs to blow them up.
Wouldn't be surprised.
No, that actually happened. Like that was they a lot of them were used in the anti-mech units.
Training battalion. Well, here we go. So they're talking a bit about like the clearing various stuff. There was a 10 kiloton nuke deployed in France as well. Almost annihilated the New Orleans division. They're fighting for Paris basically.
But basically by June 10th, they take the Geneva, and the battle in Europe is over.
Like Europe's basically over in like 3 months, because there is a lot of forces dedicated to Europe, and the Dragoons the Amaris was basically split up and not able to really go, because 3 divisions were stuck in Geneva.
So, though in Asia,
Asia was a bit of a nightmare.
You have the 3rd, 4th,
By the way,
12.
I like the reference to the port of Magadan. Magadan, if you're wondering,
Magadan
is
was one of their Magadan in Siberia is where one of their landing on. They talk about the landing groups here. They have Northern Asia, Japan, China, India, Central Asia, and Malaysia as their main landing zones.
Oh, by the way, if you're wondering, just because I like to talk about, so Magadan was originally built by the Russian Tsars as their original Pacific port. It is actually a very poor area for this. Part of it is just due to location, part of it is due to the harbor structure, part of it is just due to connections, and a lot of it has to do with climate. It is not capable of being a large port. Historically, it very rapidly lost its importance due to Vladivostok's influence. However, under the Soviets, it gained new life as a secondary rearmament port, I think, for their submarines, if I recall.
Yes.
And in our timeline, when the Soviets fell, Magadan rapidly lost importance and essentially went through a massive case of flight, and is a city not quite in crumbles, but lost like 2/3 of its population because, again, it's not a good port. It just isn't. It's capable of doing some local fishing. It's able to do a little bit of crabbing, but that's about it. It's mostly used just to make sure that the Sea of Okhotsk actually is primarily Russian-based in terms of crabbing. Because funnily enough, they fought entire economic wars with Japan, China, both Koreas, the Philippines, the U.S. can't, like, you name a nation, they went to the Sea of Okhotsk to harvest all the crabs to fuck over Russia.
They talk about
Botswana.
the Tusk.
What about Botswana?
Botswana and crab fishing.
I do know
Yes.
there were several
They
African
landlocked
ship companies that
country
did
of
do that. Yeah.
Botswana.
No,
Yeah,
you're
so they
joking,
talk-
but there were some African companies that joined in on fucking Russia over until it was
No, but the
redefined.
problem is Botswana's landlocked.
So, well, yeah, that's the joke. So anyway, they talk a little bit about like the permafrost, all this other fucking shit that's going on, and they're like, it's like -70
it's
centigrade
terrible.
in some of these areas.
Ooh.
And they're like, well, upside, the ground is frozen, thus heavy armor mechs can move no problem. Downside, it's still -70.
Also, Magadan is so great.
You can run hot.
By the way,
Magadan
Magadan is so great. They only had like 5 companies guarding it, or not even 5,
Yeah,
like 4.
the
4
so
companies.
they go
gave
down
up,
there.
and that's it.
I love this, by the way. So they're talking about like they're going through a bunch of bases and they're trying to establish like stuff around the Arctic Circle as like a
Oh, by the way,
landing zone.
Amaris opened up gulags in the area because they're perfect
Yes,
to
they
starve
did.
them to death.
Oh
So they basically went. I love this. So they're appreciating the fact that they have these. The Magadan landings are basically unopposed. The main problem was finding accommodation because there's not enough people.
And on top of that, this is near where one of the gulags were. Here's a description. It's populated by a mix of political prisoners and hardened criminals. The camp was a dumping ground, and its inhabitants treated as subhuman. Most were malnourished and suffering from cold exposure. Many also showed signs of radiation poisoning.
Because there was a forced labor camp extracting uranium.
Yeah.
Most of those that were rescued immediately volunteered to join the SLDF.
Yes, they did.
Yatutsk was also very similar. Yatutsk is actually kind of funnier. So,
by the way, they were very happy when
Magadan was basically like, there's only 30 dudes there. 30 dudes total. To defend this fucking city, which is hilarious. They just immediately surrender because like, why the fuck are we gonna fight? The Yatutsk is actually even funnier. So Yatutsk was the headquarters of the East Siberian Defense Regiment, a commercial security unit that had been suborned by Amaris's cronies and conscription. So basically, mall cops. They hired a bunch of mall cops.
And the best part is Yakutsk is also much better in compared to like say fucking Magadan, but it's still really isolated. Even now, it is. The Lena River is kind of its only main transport. By comparison,
they literally were warned ahead of time, and they dropped in the middle of the city, and it took 3 hours to take it.
But there's good news from all this, because they needed to reinforce transport infrastructure. They built over 2,000 kilometers of roads and 16 new bridges.
If you're wondering, it's because Irkutsk has one thing, and Yakutsk has one point of value. It had a maglev rail line towards Alaska, which is critical if you're going to take Unity City from that angle.
Right. However, the problem is that the Amaris immediately secured the crossings over there, so that was not going to be an easy one. Now, Harbin is actually a kind of a in the next
which
stuff
is
landing
in
over
the
in Manchuria.
the Manchuria Autonomous Region, which includes the Korea. I say the Korea because it appears it's been reunited.
I do like how Outer Mongolia is still separate from Inner Mongolia.
But
Forever
yeah, so
divided, eternally cucked Mongolia.
they actually managed to do a decent job. They take a lot of the city.
Oh, I'm noticing
And
Cambodia and
then-
Laos are not. Oh, they're not going to be happy. This was a big problem. Like legitimately, Laos and
French
Cambodia.
Indochina issue, yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah,
Burma and fucking Siam. They went through 33 wars. What? No, and it's not friendly like Sweden and Denmark are now. They fucking hate each other. No.
Well, remember, it was what was the Eastern Co-Prosperity Sphere, and then it became the Terran Alliance, by the combination between the
I'm
Western
my
going
Alliance.
to add
God.
to look away from India then.
Look! It looks like
Greater Pakistan has been established.
Greater Kashmir too. Oh no. Oh no.
and Afghanistan still exists.
Afghanistan is its
Sikkim.
own autonomous.
Sikkim is its own autonomous zone too.
And Bangladesh is apparently independent.
I mean, a united Bengali people could hypothetically work.
Yeah. So
that's not as bad.
The 133rd Jump Infantry ended up in the complex around the spaceport at Harbin, and then there was a tactical nuclear device gutted, which basically gutted 5 regiments and destroyed 4 flat out.
I love that they get out of their drop pods and they're like, okay, position, boom.
Basically, yeah. There was a lot.
Tactical nuke incoming.
No, not tactical.
Any units
then I
not
started nuking.
part of there's basically artillery it's an artillery duel game of cat and mouse. It was
not just normal artillery duel, nuclear
artillery duel, yeah. By the 5th of February, however, the remnants of the defenders are against the river. A battalion escapes into the government division. They tried to do a last booby trap, didn't work out. SLDF managed to take it. They also the pursuers stopped after they were fleeing the city because they're like, oh, thank God they're not chasing it. Then they just got obliterated by warships.
Yeah.
From orbit, because at this point the SLDF was orders were not to destroy the population centers. They're out of the population center now.
Also, fuck these guys in particular.
Also, so with Japan, I find it funny that
they assigned two army groups to it. Yeah.
I don't think that's stupid. I think that's not a bad idea because islands are always a pain in the ass to hop over.
No, it's he was repeating the Japanese World War II propaganda.
Yeah, this is actually just Operation Downfall.
Amaris portrayed the returning SLDF as vengeance-hungry barbarians whose only desire was to kill and destroy.
Also, the invasion plans are literally just Operation Downfall, like legitimately.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that they do have a few fun battle division names: the Rio Grande Division, the Hercules Division, the King's Own Jump Troops. Again, I love the unit names in this. It's a fun campaign.
By the way, if you're wondering, initially these landings in Japan were very harsh. The militia did actually fight uniquely among most militias. They actually fought hard. They fought. They fought.
They were effective roadblocks. They didn't have much equipment, but they were very good at. They were very good at fighting along defense lines.
Now, however, after a few battles and realizing that they're treated well, they started to rapidly lose their fighting effectiveness because the propaganda was clear bullshit.
Yeah, most of the fun bit is that most of these militia that fought were basically given like pardons. They were paroled and served as guides for the SLDF forces.
Yeah,
so,
it's kind of a neat. I actually like this neat touch where it's like, yeah, they're willing to throw down to their very lives, but once they realize,
okay, they're not actually doing this. So
it's a nice touch. I really like that.
They also they turn on the West. By the way, the Westmoreland Division.
Yeah,
they named one after that guy.
Which guy?
General Westmoreland, the guy that fought in Vietnam.
Oh.
Yeah.
The SLDF managed to destroy the 22nd Amaris Chasseurs, which were based around Kokura Arsenal. The 300 Dragoon Regiment liberated Nagasaki.
Which they had to highlight as the site of a bombing?
Which they note, hey, there was nuclear there.
They nuked it again?
No, they did not.
Oh, thank
goodness.
They
did not. That would have been really funny, though.
That would have been something Amaris would
Basically
do.
Put the
What would have been on, if I was Amaris, like I'm crazy and evil, right? I would, as they're about to invade, nuke my own city, and then said, "Why would they do this to us?"
Yeah,
no. It's like, we're going to spend money to make a Godzilla battle mech. So when they land, we're gonna play the Godzilla music, and it's gonna rise up.
Oh no, that'd be. I'd love that. I'd love if they had an experiment.
Can I explain Can I at least explain the Nagasaki fight, because it's actually really cool in terms of details where they're talking about, like, so they've got the arsenal there, they've got a few other things in the fighting around the mountains and coastal plain around it, but then they're talking about there's an arcology in the port. So in the streets around, like, Kyushu, so they have to there's a siege basically of this city on the water. Where they're using electronic warfare and fighting drones in order to get control of the complex, because it was an important maintenance yard for ships, which would allow for also starships to land.
Oh,
yeah. But they also took control of most of the stuff. Tokyo, though, became a quagmire because Tokyo is, an incredibly dense urban environment.
Oh yeah.
They are fighting in the suburbs of Tokyo. For a decent amount of time, basically trading casualties for casualties. They try
also
to cross
a lovely bit of art showing the type of shit Amaris soldiers would do.
Yeah. Are those Amaris soldiers, or?
Could be SLDF, but I feel like it's an Amaris.
One of the basically the Japanese imperial family, by the way, is still around. They're actually they're titled dukes now of
Oh, that's got to
of the Star League, which, I mean, yeah, but they're still around.
Also, yes, their current head, the current head of the imperial family, was held hostage. The Cavaliers basically tried to use him as
so
leverage.
They murdered her. They murdered his daughter Miko, and left her body to be recovered by the SLDF, which then special forces units managed to breach the Imperial Palace and rescue the Emperor. Well, not Emperor, but Duke of Japan.
Save the rest of his family. Also, damn near killed the general.
Yeah, they finally surrendered. The Shibuya was also a real fight. Like, they were in the park around Shibuya, and they had to fight there. And then Shinjuku became the final battleground in Tokyo, which is really an interesting fighting area.
Then it's
Mongolia.
China.
Mongolia, the throat singing intensifies. Oh, there's the Wellington Division.
There
the 159th Battle Mech Division.
Western China became massive local infighting between divisions of the 19th Army. They faced little resistance at first, but obviously
it was a fucking
mountainous
nightmare.
region made it difficult to make supplies. There's also massacres
by the 201st Amaris Lancers, who are basically using the civilian population as a
third of the 8 million inhabitants were murdered outright or killed when used as human shields, and they would repeat their crimes in other cities.
Basically,
you can see why Kerensky basically said, just shoot them anyway.
Just shoot them, yeah.
Because if they kept doing that and you tried to slow, like, legitimately, it's a case of...
It was starting to slow shit down a lot. Like, the Jaipur was actually another big landing zone. Multiple armies, 9th and 14th, to take India. Mostly because, here's the thing. Only 3 Amaris units were known to be present in India. The districts were not exactly, like, expected to be too difficult. The main problem, though, was the hegemony the hegemony patriot units.
Because while there's not official, like, RimWorld Republic units that were loyal to Amaris personally, India actually legitimately kind of supported him a lot. Like, enough of the patriot divisions.
By the way, I love this. I love this when they're talking about the fighting in the old town around Jaipur, where they literally take the last stand is literally in the Amber Fort from the 16th century.
Oh,
I think that's really fitting.
Yeah, and essentially, though, the 151st Royal Battletech Division, Ulysses
Oh,
S.
I think
Grant
this is
Division.
actually a slight nod to how Babur took the fort himself, because it includes the rebellion against the commanding officers where they were thrown from the rampart. That actually did happen.
Yeah, history is like a poetry. It rhymes.
History's like poetry. You steal it and then put it in your story.
They also took Isfahan as well. There's a few other stuff that they're going with for like spaceport stuff. The King Henry Division took Rajasthan and Gujarat, Surat, and Mumbai. 8th American Dragoons staged a forward defense, but they were eventually kind of just
Basically,
destroyed
India
after.
was a little bloodier than they thought, but that's just mostly because, funnily enough, they were more devoted to their Patriot divisions. Like, they had a lot more
Also,
local support than they thought.
The main thing was actually no. India basically erupted into a civil war because there was a lot of resentment at the Amaris, but there's also a lot of opportunities to settle some very old grudges.
Yep.
And they took them.
Yeah.
Central Siberia was also pretty easy. I love this little section because it's like, literally, it's like we have to take the fucking Trans-Siberian Railway.
And
That's the task, and they did. And it's a really simple bit where they're talking about all this, and of course, the 101st Jump Infantry Division took the Baikonur Space Cosmodrome,
which is actually, again, where the original
the Screaming
Odessa
Eagles.
drop came from. Yep.
They're also literally the Screaming Eagles.
That's
they
cute.
would later become a mercenary unit, I think, which was still called the Screaming Eagles. The 166th Mechanized Infantry, the Red Diamond Division, that's actually based off of the U.S. 5th Infantry, if I remember correctly. That's the Red Diamond.
By the way, the Amaris troops, realizing that they were fucked, they didn't really choose to fight. They just chose, okay, let's just destroy all of this ancient history. They basically turned on the Cosmodrome, destroyed as much as they could, and then just kind of said, fuck it.
Yeah, there's a lot of fighting around Singapore was actually some of the hardest in Asia.
It's gotta be because big city.
It's a big city with a tight strait. Causeways were demolished, and there were crossings they had to take.
They take it by the 2nd of March.
They actually took it on April 8th. They managed to succeed and establish a beachhead. Then they managed to take the whole city by the end of by the start of March, basically.
So
another good
after
bit of
that, we kind of have mobilization for rebuilding civilian infrastructure and then making our push to take the rest of the planet.
Basically, they were securing the old world, effectively, other than Africa.
Yeah.
So consolidation, like Eastern Europe, they pushed into the Caucasus, get into the Balkans and Istanbul. They finally siege out Severodolsk, and basically the morale eventually caused a lot of morale collapses in Amaris troops.
So, some interesting scenarios are Transylvania actually fought against all sides, legitimately.
Yeah. The partisan bands would basically be fighting everyone in the area. One of the more other interesting ones is the 15th Army securing Ireland and Iceland, and the 5th Army getting in trouble with a lot of the natives because they had heavy casualties and they had nothing to prepare for, so they had to eventually he managed to calm them down by saying, we're going to assault North Africa, we need to train for that. Didn't actually happen. The 6th Army secured its hold of Sicily and Malta and Crete. The major stuff was Spain was still really quiet, so Corsica and Sardinia, the Canaries, were kind of taken. China and India, though, were absolutely fucking nightmare units because the 19th Army was like, how do we police this shit?
Especially since at this point the United Dravidian movement was rioting against it, and they kept going after the war.
Most of southern India was in revolt until even after Amaris was gone. China was a slow and just nightmare thing. They eventually managed to catch the 201st Lancers around Wuhan, annihilated them almost to the last man.
Which is actually a nod to China's first victory in the Second Sino-Japanese War. Wuhan was one of the very first battles where they actually destroyed a Japanese division. Up until then, entire formations of theirs got crushed. It was the first time China proved they could win.
The thing is that the fighting in Japan and India basically made Kerensky completely reevaluate the next step of the campaign. Because his original plan was, we're just going to take Africa and we're going to take South America. That way we don't have to worry about any other stuff before we take the Americas.
Well, also, you forget the last factor and why he changed his mind. Because India was a shit show and would remain one. China was a problem, but it was actually the Castle Bryans because
Right.
they proved to be even nastier than Sandhurst.
Yeah, Kathmandu was, again, finally had
Tianjin
fallen to
in
Amaris,
particular.
but like Tianjin was fucking nuts. Takayama was really fucking hard to take. There's a lot of shit that was happening, but the preparations and securing basically the foothold around Tangier and Sueda would remain the SLDF's only African plan until of course they had to act like they were going to still do it. Paper divisions, all this other stuff that
Which
was
is
happening.
a nod to the Calais fooling trick.
Yeah, I mean they had to do it. So the main problem was, how do you get to North America?
Because this is Amaris'
By boat?
bastion.
So Europe and Asia are largely in SLDF's hands.
It takes a year, by the way,
They
to
took
prepare
about
for
30% casualties taking Europe and Asia. It was not very good. They'd had to disband 13 divisions and use them as replenishment for the rest.
So the basically changing plan is we are not going after
We're not
Africa
going to
and
go after
South
Africa and South America. We'll take Australia because there's still Castle Bryan's there, and it will free up a more area for us to operate in orbitally.
By the way,
But
because
otherwise,
they are having manpower issues at this point, a lot of those soldiers, this is like the 5th time they've been in hospice. Like, a lot of them have been wounded multiple times already. There's a reason why active combat troops usually are cycled out, because eventually you just shatter. Your head just breaks.
There's a lot of civilian on civilian violence as well, and a lot of AEAF forces are killed by the SLDF because they're basically like emotionally and physically just like done. They don't give a shit. Like, fuck it.
So
Summary justice.
Yeah.
It's kind of getting into this.
Oh, so by the way, there's actually an example they mention in Norway where the SLDF units there, by this point, basically cracking because of the experience. They just take out their rage on the civilians. They're just done.
Yeah. Yep.
Kerensky had to spend months basically just essentially bringing back order.
Yeah. And they managed to get Zalman. By the way, remember that guy running stuff in Bolivia? The resistance over in Brazil. He managed to get out. Yeah, he managed to get out of South America and link up with Kerensky, and give a lot of information about what was actually happening. His resistance group is one of the most successful.
So next up, Australia.
So basically, it's a secondary effort, but it's important because of the STS batteries in the Pacific Ocean, which meant that re-entry corridors to North America, because of how orbital mechanics work, are going to go over them. So,
which is accurate to sci-fi itself,
it's accurate to the actual orbital mechanics. Yeah. Yes. So therefore, we need to take Australia.
So
also this way they can steal from the Pacific Island campaign more.
By the way, they took the entire garrison of Carver 5, who had just fought 9 years, and told them, "Welcome to Australia, motherfucker. You know what you did that entire decade? That's right. You get to do it again."
And they were fucking eager by that point, because
probably, yeah, like they were assigned to the various units, and sort of island hopping from Singapore to Australia.
So as you can see on page 94, the actual D-Day landing.
Yeah,
they even have troops on the boats.
But I love they show the landings in Australasia. They redeployed a bunch of stuff. They landed in New Zealand. There's the Third Army does a lot in this war. I fucking love this shit though. They're talking about the fighting here for
and it's interesting
violence. It's interesting in that it's like the Philippines were a bit of a nightmare, mostly because there were a lot of stuff in like Indonesia, because it's a highly dense area, but also it's a very intensive jungle fighting with SDS batteries everywhere they have to take out. So they managed to take out Hawaii, by the way.
But by the way, the Amaris protocol, at this point, they are consistently trying to use human shields, and it's not working, because by this point, yeah, everyone's fucking done.
Yeah, the fighting in Australia is really fun.
Well, no. But before then, honorable mention goes to the 201st Dragoons were the worst. Legitimately, they got the highest number of war crimes, to the point where they were made an example of after the Civil War. Cutler's Vagabonds, which is a mercenary unit, in the running because they basically did the same thing throughout all of Borneo. They terrorized the population and legitimately chained them and forced them to fight on pain of death for them by holding family members hostages. They also used them for terrorist attacks. I'd say they rank a number 2 on the Amaris war crimes numbers. But yeah, Australia, which took 2 armies, by the way.
Well, a lot of it was.
Although 4th mostly was focused on New Zealand.
The 257th Jump Infantry Regiment fucking died outside in Adelaide. It was just a nightmare. They could not hold it. The 53rd Mars Fusiliers kind of fought it. So basically, less than a third managed to escape, but the 205th managed to get there 40 hours later with a mixed regiment. They managed to finally secure Australia. Absolutely nightmare fucking thing because they had to go around the north.
Although here's the thing, it should be noted that even though the 123rd they experienced something like 70% casualties, or maybe even over 100% if you include walking wounded. The Kerensky's decision to attach a battalion of Carver 5 vets, basically that's what saved the unit, and on top of that, that is why they got bounced, but they did successfully destroy most of the defensive networks. That's the big reason 205 was able to storm the beaches and land and hold.
Well, they were going across the south coast. They landed in Perth and they made their way to Adelaide.
No, I am noting with these 2 positions service landing zones for the next day. In the course of a few hours, they made a quick suborbital hot attack in Perth. They mentioned something about the combined secured positions 100 kilometers north and south of Perth. So their main landing site failed, but they were able to still hold.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The
lovely battle right here.
Yeah, lovely battle. I love the little shark teeth on one of the mechs. That I think that's a mongoose, not a mongoose, Mercury there.
I also think I see one of their transformable mechs up there getting shot.
That's a land air mech.
Yeah.
So they found, by the way, the deserts of Australia.
Oh my god, that's them shooting. I think that's them shooting Zeta Gundam in his Wave Rider formation. That might be.
There's some fun stuff here. They go and talk about like they're going inland. They crossed the fucking outback.
Yeah, they had to do that.
They had to do that, which, God. They finally crack open, but they didn't talk about the Gold Coast. They managed to take it by mid-February, so basically about a year after the stuff. And a lot of this stuff is, I absolutely love this. They talk about the fact that General Jack Lucas did this entire campaign, who we saw before. The Third Army would make landfall in the Gold Coast of California. So the really fun thing here is the confession that he's talking about from like Valier talking about like the stuff about Third Army's area of responsibility, and it's just like we have to take this guy out because he's cracking. My favorite was a complaint lodged by some damn civilian aid agency. Of course, the particular version of the story is very different from when it really happened, but on 2 separate occasions they claimed they were firebombed by Third Army. As a matter of fact, they were, but they failed to indicate that in the first instance, their convoy was stopped at a critical intersection during the Goon attack. Their trucks were blocking the Jack's guys from counterattacking, so Jack's guys took out 2 trucks after giving their drivers time to clear out and rolled through. The second instance occurred when one of their convoys tried to roll through a road dock without stopping and presenting ID. But basically, like, Third Army had done like at least 5 different massacres of goons and hedges of security forces / OPD agents, and basically Jack did nothing about it.
If you're again, this is there's a reason I mentioned the cycling. I think it was exactly 180. I think it's 180 days. It might be more. It might be less. I think that's the maximum. Like even the most unbothered, like sociopathic of all people, like the ones that feel nothing for killing others and stuff. Even by that point, the sheer stress would break them because of their threat to their life.
The other thing is that Third Army
was through the meat grind. They were
they were the ones that were volunteering almost every time there was a difficult task to go through. And Australia was finally the point where it's like, we need to actually give these guys a rest.
which again is a there's reasons I do like this is a light ding on Battletech, but given the situation, I don't blame them for keeping them on. This is why you cycle out your veterans.
That said, they would still have Third Army involved with taking it, because it's like, how do you fucking tell them no at this point if they want to still do it?
At this point, how are they not dying of heart attacks and like screaming at walls?
Kinda, but there's probably still
like,
units.
No offense. After a certain point, like this is something that the BattleTech is kind of ignoring.
They did give them 6 months time to prepare. That's the thing, though. They did have a lot of time to wrap up here. Like they had like a 6-month period of rest.
That helps, but by this point, the damage is probably irreversible on their head.
Sorry, they had 2 weeks.
Yeah, you're not. You're. That's a patch job.
They had like 6 months before Australia, though. I think.
I would be
they landed
very
somewhere else.
interested to see their suicide rates after the war. I imagine it isn't
It wasn't good, but like Third Army was fucking everywhere.
Oh, by the way, from Unarmed Dude, better to shoot the Amaris troops the first time rather than let them take human shield second, third, and fourth time. No, that's just like that's their first instinct every time.
Yeah. So the landings in North America, I kind of love this. So basically, put Third Army gets to storm Hollywood.
Yes.
As I said, they were like, okay, so you got the
send the people who are one more battle away from just full on like
send them right into California. A lot of it is that they did give them some time to refresh a little bit and rotate units in and out. Like the Third Army wasn't just the same divisions the entire time.
I'm aware, but like there's a point where, again, after that much stress, you're not even going to be able to hold your rifle correctly because you're shaking.
Yeah. They then talk about like the Mexico landings. A lot of this is kind of like the same. It's just like they land, they move in,
they land,
go up
they
and down
experience
the coast.
Human shields.
It goes
nukes.
fucking nuts. It's kind of the battle for Vancouver is a bit more of an interesting one because they're starting to deploy a lot of nukes. It's starting to get really nasty.
Mech landing. Let's see. Any detail? Mexico has a strong resistance movement.
Yeah, Mexico was. I think we mentioned this before. Mexico was actually a strong part of anti-Cameron sentiment. So Mexico City, like again, there was an entire Mexican brigade that I talked about in the last video.
I'm really curious. Let's see. Oaxaca action did to bring some additional attention to Mexico. Historically active independent streak. That is actually partially incorrect. That is a nod to the Zapatistas that are native to the area, but they still consider themselves a part of Mexico, at least partially. They just disrespect the government for its corruption and just tendency to interfere.
That's kind of what they probably mean by that.
I mean, there are some indigenous independent movements partially, but that's more of a Yucatan thing.
Yeah, there's also fighting, of course, on the East Coast as well, where the Stonewall Jackson Division gets destroyed. Ironically, near Charlottesville.
Perfect.
There's a lot of other fighting, like Pittsburgh, Chicago Metropolis. The Amaris had already basically ravaged it to take everything from the SLDF that they could use to resupply. Like it was scorched earth across North America.
That's so good.
Up and down the coast, Third Army lands on a wide stretch of the California coast. By landing literally on top of them, of the enemy, they basically were able to completely overwhelm them in short order and break through and basically have zero resistance. And also, for that matter, Fourth Army then was able to just follow up and allow Third Army to take a breather. So, not too bad, honestly.
The stubborn issue is just breaking through into the Cascades, because by this point,
right,
Amaris was able to organize a pretty good defense in depth.
Yeah, they're fighting around the Portland, the Columbia River. They go into like the flooding of Vancouver and all this other stuff. And of course, the other thing is that the closer the SLDF got in, the closer it got to the point of like we're just running for our lives. So we're gonna actually talk about some of this, because while we're talking about the Unity City campaign, it's like, oh yeah, okay, that happened. Okay, yeah, so on. The Defender is basically the fall of Berlin. and we're running a little long, so I'm trying to
No, that's fair. We're
get
over 3
get
hours,
through.
but you kind of
So
have to. This stuff is cool.
Yeah. The unit again. Buy this book; it's good. The units that became that fled. So basically, there's 5 Republican regiments that somehow managed to disappear. Never were able to be captured or recorded as destroyed by the SLDF. So the 23rd American Dragoons were part of the occupation forces towards the Rimworlds. They abandoned their posts in there and instead traveled to what they assumed was their new home, the hegemony. Amaris branded them traitors and cowards, ordered them imprisoned, broke out in a firefight on the planet of Summer, leaving Patriots damaged, and the 23rd now enemies of the state. They took what supplies they could, went into the Turret Combine, and became mercenaries for Kurita.
Another one is the 141st. They were
100
troubleshooters.
The 141 was one of the units on Terra during the coup. They fought on Calf as well. They fought throughout the occupation. They were basically jumping all across the hegemony, doing a lot of stuff to counter raids and supply runs, returning to Terra as soon as one for
And
the
despite
new home was
their many crimes and solid defense of Amaris, they ditch when Europe collapses.
They're like, this is a fucking shit show. We're not living.
Also,
So they actually
they escaped
they
to
went.
the Capellans.
Yep, they escaped through the Capellans, and I think that they're one of the units that was around what is it, Astrakazi. I think that's around where they settled down.
Yes, after using one of the worlds for a secret army to resupply and rebase.
Yeah, they were.
Then there's the
able.
38th.
38th Amaris Fusiliers. They led the world of Castor. They built a Patriot force and imprisoned solid that. 38th received a recall to the hegemony in 2775 and said, "Fuck you guys, I'm going home." And they landed in the Free Worlds League, took supplies. They went out into
They either joined the Magistracy or the Taurians.
And at least some elements fought in the First Succession War. The Second Mexican Legion.
Yep.
I love these guys. It's kind of great. So
the citizen volunteers are morally ambiguous. So cartels. These are cartels.
Cartels with training recruited largely from Mexico the months leading up to the coup. This regiment, along with the 2nd and 3rd regiments raised after the coup, remained in the Terran system. So the first regiment was eliminated shortly after the SLDF to capture Mexico City, while the 3rd regiment held out into the early 2780s in Africa.
Which is pretty
The 2nd
impressive.
regiment fought in Milwaukee and Madison.
Yeah.
In the Wisconsin district, fought all the way to the Columbia River, reduced less than 3 companies. The survivors pulled back and retreated from Terra, ended up in Taurian Concordat. Again, kind of a nuts story when you think about it.
They basically had to fight their way across North America. The fact that they even survived at all as an
3 companies survived, by the way.
By the way, Darabon's Damned, also really
mercenary unit. Watched the SLDF all but ignore them and just fucked off. Went out to the. They then rechristened themselves the Dark Spirits and fought for House Merrick.
Also, they are largely responsible for the horrendous war crimes on Zolokothan.
Yep. Anyway, we finally get to the aftermath.
Oh no, there's one. Also, there's a really beautiful. I recommend seriously reading In the Night if you actually get this book. It's basically the diary of one of the many victims of Amaris's reign finally seeing a light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
There's also Surrender, which is really good. A lot of these little excerpts are fucking amazing.
Yeah.
So who had the moniker the Kyle Rittenhouse Division? He probably joined one of the Midwestern Patriot divisions or something, or maybe joined the Resistance. Who knows?
Fucking no.
There's a Hawaiian shirt militia
called
the Boogaloo Boys.
I legitimately, if there was like a regiment just called the 382nd Boogaloo Boys, that'd be pretty great.
I mean, that could easily be a mercenary unit if you want to paint your mechs in with tie-dye patterns.
That sounds really fun.
Oh, that would be fun.
Charlie don't surf.
But yeah, Maris was eventually defeated.
Maris was defeated, yay! The palace falls. There's still some stuff going on all the way into Comstar era.
Also, Amaris actually emerged with a jewel-encrusted laser pistol in his hand, the same weapon that he used to execute the Lord. He laid it at the feet of Kerensky's battle mech and surrender.
There was also a bit of an issue where Kerensky holds elections on a new term parliament intending to install a government that could unify mankind's homeworld and bring peace, backfires spectacularly.
Yeah.
Why? The new government is insanely anti-Amaris and swiftly enacted legislation that basically said anyone who had served in the police or armed forces under Amaris can't rejoin it.
This
all
is
of
not
you,
good.
Yeah,
it's nuts. Anyone who had experience in government over the last decade and a half were now tainted in the public eye. Caused a lot more problems. There's the Geneva war crimes trials.
Wait, so that reminds me of one of the Transformers comics when I guess the war's over. Cybertronians return and they elect Starscream as their leader.
Yeah.
Which I believe pisses off the Autobots, so there goes them.
So
Yeah.
if you're wondering, the reason this is actually a really bad thing, there's a reason in Germany, for example, in the aftermath of World War II, we only barred it from people that were of a certain rank or had a certain membership
They talk about
rank.
this. They talk about this on page 110.
Yeah, it's because they have institutional knowledge. They understand how government works.
Yeah.
You replace that with a bunch of people who don't understand it, well, you're liable for corruption.
Yeah, that's why they talk about the
it's also why in the aftermath
you have
of the
complicit. You have basically like complicit followers, involuntary followers, and uninvolved.
Yeah.
Is the way to put it. Where it's like followers are basically bureaucrats. They're people who had to work with the authorities, but they didn't actually do anything that was like super. Like they're kind of literally just following orders to like sign the paperwork here or do all that sort of stuff. Like not really doing like full on fucking like we are 100% are Nazis. That's like the complicit guys. Then there's involuntary followers who are we have to work because otherwise they're going to execute us. And then uninvolved is literally those that fought against it or did about nothing. So there's a lot of the stuff that they talk about with the aftermath and the anarchy that kind of follows.
Yeah, I like how they
basically,
I like how they reference Nuremberg. The other thing I was going to reference is it's actually similar to the Confederate surrender in the aftermath of the American Civil War. We only prosecuted active, I think, high-ranking. It was of a certain level in the politics of the CSA, and you could not be I believe you could not be above a lieutenant or maybe captain in the Confederate
we also
Army.
did had that part of what was it, the 14th Amendment that said if you took part of
if you were considered part of an insurrection, you could not hold office in the United States, at least federally.
Which was loosened mainly to only apply to those who had at least a high
actually
enough
fought.
rank.
Yeah.
Like if you were a sergeant in
if
the
you
Confederate
didn't have like
Army,
you basically needed an express action of Congress, I think, to get around it.
Yeah,
so if you weren't
you
an
need
officer in the army, you could not serve basically because at that point
well,
you
no,
had actually.
I think technically lieutenant you could, but captains because companies are the smallest. It's like the smallest usual tactical level because a company is usually the smallest like used in larger scale engagements. Captains couldn't, lieutenants possibly could, but I think only with the written permission of Congress.
So
and anyone outside of state office, like state senator or state representative, you were disbarred. Like if you served beyond that.
Right. Anyway, they on page 114. We finally get to the final butcher's bill.
I also love these like very serious negotiations, and also this is Kerensky just about to have a nervous breakdown because he's getting fucked on all sides.
Yeah, there's the talk about like the stuff that we did.
So you remember at the beginning of the war, there were 125 battletech divisions. We're down to 40.
Updating, like they're talking about, how many units joined the rebels. Somebody mentioned that I think that in the last videos in the comments that we didn't talk about that there were units that joined the rebellion, and yeah, there were regiments that did it. There were infantry divisions that did it. There were some warships that defected as well.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
There's quite a bit. The main thing though, if you take a look at the SLDF strength by year, like. Jesus Christ.
It is cut by 30% pretty much every. It's cut by 30% in like 2 years.
Yeah, it goes absolutely nuts. The Periphery Uprising was an absolute bloodbath, and you can see by the end of the war, the Navy is almost like
effectively gone.
1 in 5. It's effectively gone.
And the result of this is the fate of the SLDF. 70% of them. But nearly 80% of them
70% that survive goes out on the Exodus. Comstar gets 6 divisions of battle mechs, 11 of infantry, 16 independent, and then 12 warships, which is not much, but roughly about an eighth of the survivors. The rest go into House mercenary forces. Most of the Navy goes to Kerensky, as you can see.
As you can see on page 115, I believe that is the Exodus.
Yep, planning for exile. That's the Exodus, which is its own story. We talked about it in Operation Klondike.
With Klondike and the Succession Wars. So digesting the hegemony, they show which worlds were taken over by which powers and when, and the division of the hegemony by basically everyone.
And they go in a little bit in the legacies of this.
They go into the legacies of everything, like they talk about the clans kind of coming in.
Comstar and the Comguard getting formed, because basically after Kerensky left with his Exodus, there's not much left. Jerome Blake essentially kind of is seen as the savior figure in the hegemony, because he kind of gets a lot of things
on Terra in specific. The rest of it is really he can't do much. So going down, we get the wonderful rule stuff. They talk about, of course, here's your various details of Castle Bryan's.
Oh, by the way, this shows you the new hegemony, by the way, for those curious.
Yep.
They lost a lot.
They lost a lot, and they will lose. They will basically be gone by the end of the First Succession War.
And that is...
They talk about the clans because, unfortunately, Kerensky's Exodus turns into a complete fucking embarrassment. But, we don't talk about that.
Yeah. And they even talk about this where it's like they go and they mention that like the legends around the fall are kind of like... a lot of this shit is so wrapped up in mystery and mystique by this point, where they're talking about almost everything that they can.
So much information was lost in those Succession Wars.
It's not even the Succession Wars; it's also the Amaris coup and
the
like
coup, like so much damage.
There's so much damage in this, where it's like you have to understand that like you can say like, could Kerensky have fought the rest of the sphere with what he had left?
No.
And looking at it, you can see why he committed his Exodus. He was remember
he
Star
might
League...
have been able to take one. He might have been able to take one of the great houses.
I actually think he could wipe the floor with any one of them, and here's why. By this point, these are the most hardened and experienced people he had left. And because of this, and because of their 13 years of training, and because of the relatively high popularity, I think he could single-handedly fucking slaughter any one of the houses by himself. Casually.
What happens when the second one happens?
But the problem is, yes, he could not, because they were all united in telling him to piss off. So he took his ball and went elsewhere. And I don't blame him. Actually, you know what this book does, partially, since it really kind of displays the damage it's done, and it displays the consequences of fighting for 13 years with little to no furlough time, because you just don't have the manpower to actually cycle.
Why do you think a lot of them followed Kerensky into the Exodus? Because they have nothing else. Like, that's
their way of life is gone.
Everything's gone.
And on top of that,
if you were on one of these hegemony worlds, chances are all of your family is dead. All of your friends are dead. If you've survived through all of this and you're from one of the royal regiments, chances are you have no surviving family.
Yeah. By the way, you know what this also perfectly explains? This actually makes Operation Klondike, the book, look better. And here's why. It actually gives you the circumstances and mindset and the poor conditions you were in, which explains why they make crazy decisions. They're not right in the head. They are veterans who suffered clearly from the war.
Horrifically traumatized.
It drove them batty. And that makes all of their decisions actually retroactively make a lot more sense. This book, unironically, fixes a lot of my fucking gripes with Operation Klondike. Because
I think I tried to mention that to you, that a lot of the people that they were talking about, there's a lot of grumpiness because the SLDF had to be downsized due to the colony size. There's like a bunch of people who wanted to stay because the military was their life. And it had been for like the last 2, maybe even 3 decades, where they'd signed up to fight with Kerensky. And like all this other shit, all these tensions, all this
punched through the rim worlds, had to bloody their way. Imagine being one of the survivors
and then went out into the great unknown, found barely habitable worlds, and then there's these other assholes who just aren't with the program that you loathe because you've been with them for like the last 3 years on an expedition into nowhere. It's no
And
wonder
on top
you
of
see them
that,
breaking down.
you hear like something as simple as something drop, and it sounds like a loud crack or the hiss of a machine, and immediately you're back on Gram 4, trying to just get back to the front lines to get out of the radiation zone. You're back on
Right.
Carver 5, stitching together a Frankenmech just to fight against the wave of troops one more time. You're back on Caiaphas. You're back hunting the disaster, the fucking cunts in Wuhan who were using human shields and bioweapons.
Yeah,
It makes their logical. This book legitimately salvages Klondike with that in mind. The context actually makes a lot of my complaints nonsense.
where you're like, why
That's
were
why
they
this
like
book.
this? Why were they able to? And you're also like, how were they able to fight against these well-equipped warriors? And it's like, well, yeah, a lot of them were veterans or trained directly by other
Oh
veterans.
no, I understood that, but they weren't fighting like the soldiers that I was expecting. And this
Yeah,
book kind of
because a lot
explains
of
why
these are
they
like,
can't. They legitimately, their psychology's fucked. They
yeah.
have what they have on
Why
their
do you think
backs, and that's it.
Why do you think the clans are able to do the Nicholas Kerensky's grand rule, year zero shit? Because everyone's psychology is fucked.
And on top of that, they have no replacement parts. They have nothing. So
Yeah.
with that in mind, I still think Operation Klondike is a poorly written book, but I have to rate this
But you
book
understand
personally.
the
No, I
the
have to rate
clans a
this
lot
book
better.
personally. I have to
Yeah.
rate this book personally. High amazing. Because it gives you the exact context and reasoning for why the clans are the way they are.
Why the clans are the way they are, why the sphere looks like it does. Like it is the big event of Battletech.
This book
It
gives you so much details, and it explains so much that even a lay guy like myself, who doesn't fucking really, like, I'm not a big Battletech guy. I don't get into it. These guys are. That's why I bring them on. They cover for my lack of passion. I like the designs. I like the aesthetics. I like that it reminds me of Gundam. But I always thought the writing was shit. At least partially. At least when they needed the plot to advance.
when they need the plot to advance, it gets pretty shit. Yeah. But when they're doing this historical stuff, where it's
When
like
they
this is
do the
already pretty well
historical stuff,
established,
when they do the
it's
house
often
books,
very good.
this is the best book, I think.
The Succession Wars books are also pretty good too. But if we're going through this, the rules annex, we should probably talk a little bit about that. It's very similar to the last one, but they add in a
This
couple
is
of
going to
things.
be the longest one we've done in a while. It's almost 4 hours, but that's fine.
Yeah,
they
go in for another things. The first thing I'm going to talk about is that they include some fun new vehicles, including some VTOL aircraft.
Tables. They have assignment tables, by the way.
Yeah.
Actually, they have for the running personalities for just going for Legos. Gets +1 initiative bonus, +1 morale checks, use overrun combat. He may begin with a quarter of his troops hidden. He has the compulsion sociopath trait.
Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, I like that they have a pre-existing damage table.
Yeah, they do for like to represent your shit might be fucked right now in your little campaign.
I love this.
They also talk about
negative
like
design
how
quirks, because at this point you're running Frankenmechs.
Yep.
Record sheet source tables.
And they say here's where you
Lovely.
go through. Like here's all the books you can use for record sheets.
God,
that
that's
makes sense.
Lovely. Yeah, this really does explain everything about. It's not to the point where I like how the clans have won Terra. I think that's really stupid.
Nobody likes that aside from clan tags.
But I understand where they came from. I hate what they've become, but god damn it, do I understand them now.
Yeah. And then
Holy
also
shit.
I love the vehicles that they do add, because a lot of them are kind of like patch up little bits of the
They even have the prototype jammer to explain how it works. That's really
Yep.
cute.
So if you want to add it to that, the vector project is very interesting, where it's like, okay, so let's try to make a VTOL configuration that can be configured on one basic chassis, simplify logistics. And they then did not last very long. Production lines got destroyed. They were flown to pieces. Yeah, Amaris ruined it. Amaris ruined this wonderful little helicopter.
Yeah,
easy to maintain, improved communications, a small pulse laser, 2 medium lasers, and an infantry compartment. It is the perfect little gunship, basically, for like, I want to deploy troops in a hot zone. This thing is kind of ideal for it.
It's amazing for that, and on top of that, well, I mean, the other sad thing is any of them that were left behind were almost certainly destroyed in one of the succession wars, probably the first.
Yeah, as long as the rotor isn't hit, this thing could take. Hell, this thing can take an AC-10 shot and still survive.
Which is very scary.
Yeah, short of an AC, hell, it can take a Gauss rifle round and still survive.
That's very scary for something designed to transport on the cheap.
Yep, and there's a few that
There's
replace
also the Valley, which is a wheeled vehicle. Here it
a
is.
nice little APC with a fucking Arrow 4 launcher. Holy shit!
Yes, it does.
Yeah, it was based on a recovery vehicle, which they then slapped on an Arrow 4 launcher. Jesus Christ! It's basically a little Arrow 4 carrier, which is kind of cute.
They also have the AEM Dragoon.
Well, there's also
Yep,
the Ballista.
the Ballista, which is a nice, fun one where they talk. It's basically here's an example of just a self-propelled artillery piece. Here you go.
Oh, it's a cool piece.
The LBX carrier is actually very interesting. So the basics behind this is that we need to make a tracked vehicle that can, at the very least, fight pretty well. And here you go, 2 LBX-10 autocannons, which I would argue are the best baseline guns of the Inner Sphere. There's incredibly versatile, light. They don't do much heat. They do a lot of damage. They have good range. They have options for shells, which is either you can do your cluster munitions or your standard. Pretty great. And they have a decent deployment. And they're like, well, they can eviscerate a lot of forces. However, they take a lot of damage.
They also have supporting LRM 5s, just in case.
Yes, which are
It's
but there's also a fun one which I liked is the trio of Ultra AC5s. That's roughly 6 AC5 shots a turn.
Here are some notes. It has the design quirks. Trailer hitch, which means it can cart more, which is nice. It's difficult to maintain though, and poor workmanship.
Yeah, because these were slapdash vehicles. Same thing with the ADA heavy tank. I love this one, by the way. So it has a sniper artillery cannon, and then also an LBX-10. Because why not?
Oh, I know what this thing is. This is actually this is if the Federation's version of the tank, I forget what it's called, the Type 61, I think, had a baby with what looks like a Zaku tank.
Yeah, they have a lot of fun with these. Now the designs here, the Dragoon, as I said, it's one of the earlier designs that kind of sort of inspire to some degree the Omni-Mech design. It looks really good. David White did an excellent job at designing this thing.
The way its head looks, the way its torso looks. You know what you know what I'm hearing? Once the Big Zam is mass produced, the Federation.
Federation. Well, I mean, this is what it was. It's a 70-ton battle mech with a 65 kph speed. That's pretty good. 38 tons of weapons and equipment. It's basically like it's got a pair of AC-10 LBX-10s and an ERPPC. It's got a lot of firepower. It's got ECM.
Nice jump jets, which allow it to hop.
A jump jet. It's not as much as you'd like, but it's still pretty good.
Do little hops. It's a
and
good
the other
machine.
Configurations are actually really cool too. There's one with an AC-20, ERPPC, and 5 medium lasers, plus a small pulse laser. That's pretty decent. Trio of Artemis 4 equipped LRM-15s with 2 tons of ammunition, a single medium laser, and paired medium and small pulse lasers. Pretty decent as well. And then the last one is basically a stripped-down version, which carries a Gauss rifle for 5 SRM-4s, a pair of medium lasers, and an ERPPC. All of that's pretty heavily armed mech. The Pueblo class dropship is another one that's kind of mentioned here, which is there's an example for a dropship stuff where they also have the stats for the Stefan Amaris class battleship. I love this.
They
little
also have
bastard.
the Pueblo class dropship, which again, if you're playing around with that, you have it there. Just really quickly, it has a lot of cargo bays, lifeboats, blah blah blah. Let's show the Lee class dropship as well. That's another one. Basically, these were used on the drops.
Yep.
And let's show you the Amaris class battleship, which low-key is actually
the funny thing.
Wait a minute.
By the way, is that the most premier user of these, arguably, is the SLDF, because they took 2 uncompleted ones and used them in Task Force Leonidas.
So here's a fun fact about the Amaris class battleship. It is if you gave the Conestoga class cruiser from Aliens and paired it with what I think is, I'd say it's partially Salamis, but the lines kind of remind me of a Musai if it made more sense.
It's a neat ship.
It's a
When
good
it,
ship design. Basically, it's borrowing heavy from a certain aesthetic, a little more alien or aliens, I'd say, than Gundam, but it's a good design.
yep,
I
over a
like it.
million tons displacement.
That's pretty insane, but yeah.
It's
Here's all of the
space
things it has: heavy NPPCs,
a lot.
heat usage. Fuck you. 3 Gauss rifles.
A bunch of killer whales.
Yeah,
Heavy NPC. Yeah, it has basically everything. It's
it's cool.
Four LRM-20s.
Yeah,
yep, lasers, point defense. It has everything.
it has a lot, and just imagine like this coming out of nowhere to help fuck up your world, because by this point you don't really have space navies anymore.
yeah. So yeah, that's this book. There's the record sheets afterwards in case you want to use any of these. I still say the Dragoon is a really, really fun
It's a solid design.
heavy mech. It's a solid mech. It's got an XL fusion engine. You can talk about that. Like
I in particular like their vehicles that they give
I
you.
don't like that it has the ammunition, the cluster ammunition inside of its center torso.
It's bad, but you
But
know, I'd say their vehicles
whatever.
are nice, like the ballista.
Yeah, it's doing
The
pretty
LBX
good.
is nice.
The LBX, the pair of LBX is actually really good. On a 70-ton mech, that's a lot of firepower. This thing can rip apart a lot of enemy
I mean,
battle
it'll
mechs.
blow up if it gets shot in the center, but you know.
Plus it can jump. It's a night. Like people go, oh, the Amaris had no good ideas. The Dragoon is basically Krupp slapping their dicks on the table and saying, we've only designed one battle mech before this, which was the Lancelot, which was more of like a rapid fire kind of design. It's kind of a neat one, but this is just a better version of that. It's really cool. Can't punch anything, but that's fine. It can just fire at everything.
And
It can
bunny hop
be
away.
and bunny hop away. And it also looks really cool. I like the design
Solid
for it.
design,
It's
very smooth, sleek. I also like how they give you drop ships, even though those are suffering. If you really fucking hate someone, though, if you really hate someone, just have this battleship though appear out of nowhere.
yeah.
Just
So
fuck
what
their
is
day up.
so what is your overall thoughts on these two books together?
Well, you guys
You know
first.
what I'm going to compare it to? I'm going to compare it to the Horus Heresy books, which I guess similar thing of it's the prequel game or the prequel narrative. This definitely has more of that straight military feel. The Horus Heresy books did as well, but obviously much more narrative, much more loose on what happens, so you can have your battles. But they definitely accomplish very much what they're intending to do, which is show how much destruction happens because of this, to clearly point out in the future how much has been lost.
Yeah, I think that it does do a good job of that. Adam, you were about to say something. Sorry.
Oh no, like I said, I already rate this as a very highly amazing book. Volume 2 is dense, but it has a lot of the sort of things I very much like, which is just when they go into the nitty-gritty of stuff like that. And when paired with part 1, it, like I said, I'm a layman. I'm not as much into Battletech as you guys are, not remotely. It's not my cuppa. But this, even to me, a person who mostly absorbed this via osmosis, I rate rather highly. It's very informative. It gives you a good idea on why the situations are as they are in just the start of the game setting, which is 3025. It also really does get you into the psychology and mindset of why the hell the clans even became a thing. Because, I mean, you serve a long war, people tell you to fuck off, you got no one else left. You only really, at this point, feel safe inside a mech or killing because, well, the ghosts of your prior battles are in your head. And then you're following this guy who you basically committed your life to elsewhere. He dies tragically, and well, I mean, what do you do now? Do you listen to his son who's in a wolf suit? Well, probably at this point, because you're not exactly right in the head. You had to kill several of your own comrades by venting them into space, so still, it is
Yeah.
kind of silly they lost to space Afghanistanis after some of the bullshit they faced. Let's be fair.
I mean, yeah, but there's at least some explanation for like why were they having trouble?
The
It's 'cause they're
mindset
also
makes
fighting
sense.
combat veterans.
No, the mindset makes sense. Their performances, I think, are still more damning, but that's just the consequences of WizKids supporting the person who wrote that.
I mean, that was almost entirely Catalyst. It's in the WizKids era of publishing, but it is.
This is just Catalyst being poor writers. Like, the person
Yeah.
writing that just fucked it up.
I mean,
I think they were trying to go for, they had no, at this point, they basically were on scraps, but it didn't feel like it when they wrote it.
right.
This really recontextualizes it and kind of really helps with it.
It also gives you an idea of like the sheer devastation, and then it's like,
Oh, yeah, the
wait,
scope.
it's not over yet. Because we have
We have diehard Amaris
succession
supporters
horse.
in Africa, which is actually a nod from Gundam. African separatists. A lot of Zeonic troopers, when they couldn't get off of Earth, actually joined up with local pro-Arab nationalists, as well as just nationalists in general from other sub-Saharan African countries, and formed an African resistance under a guy who literally names himself Rommel. Like he gave himself a nom de guerre, naming himself after Rommel. And he's a black supremacist, and it's really insane. That's a bit of a nod to that. South India being that's their own creation, and I think that makes a lot of sense. It just being a complete shit show. I really, in particular, I think my favorite thing I really liked just is to show the devastation is just the nightmare that's Italy. Having essentially Oscar Derlowanger run all of Italy and just killing the Pope because he wanted more money from the church. That has a certain je ne sais quoi, you know?
There's a lot of just really neat little tricks in this book, honestly. Like
Amaris Schizo rambling that he's gonna destroy Terra, and his descendants do kind of fits too.
yeah, I kind of also love like they include a little bit of stuff about Amaris. Like he had some audio logs. That's kind of that profile bit. It's there's like a lot of little fun details in this, like the whole Carver 5 stuff.
Carver 5 is the best page.
Like the that planet. It was also the site of I think the Mech Commander video games, where it was under a different name. But anyway, I would absolutely love like a scenario anthology with Carver 5, because you could literally include every single type of unit in Battletech there conceivably in a single scenario book, from spaceships to submarines to infantry to not battle armor, not yet. Well, actually yes, you could, because you would have the Nighthawk suits, the light power armor guys. So you could have those sort of operations of like, yeah, they've got some of those suits and they're using them for like Guadalcanal style infantry raids and stuff. There's a lot of stuff you could mine for either games or role playing in this time period, because it's arguably the storm before the storm.
Oh, also some comments. I think you'll get a hoot out of this. Zen also mentions, remember, the Dragoon also can fire backwards because it can rotate its arms.
Mechs without upper arm actuators have the little quirk, and I love it, is that arm can rotate 180 degrees right behind itself and fire behind it. This is something that the rifleman can do, for example, which is, I would never want to do it in a rifleman because it has 0 armor on its rear, pretty much, but it can do it. A funnier mech to do it with is the God, what is? I'm trying to think of the name of it. The funnier one, arguably, to do it with is the the quick draw. The quick draw has a quirk for it, and so does the funniest thing is so does the Marauder hyperextending actuators. It can literally fire behind itself. I think that there is a few clan mechs like that as well, where because how Omni-mechs work, sometimes they don't have upper arm actuators, so you can do really funny like meme builds where you're like, okay, yep, nope, oops, all rear fire.
And also, one last known fact about the Greenwich Gestapo: upon murdering the Pope, Lagos actually defaces the Sistine Chapel painting by replacing his face on top of God.
As I said, these books are like a little gold mine of like just like, oh,
that guy just needed to be strung and quartered.
Yeah. Yeah.
On that happy note of that face now being on the Sistine Chapel, I think we can call it here.
So I want someone to actually do that as a
do that
shit
Photoshop.
post.
We'll put that as like the channel banner for a while, I guess.
No, you're joking, but no, I totally will because that's so fucking cursed.
That's so cursed, but it's really great. Or change the thumbnail to that.
Mm-hmm.
You can do that after.
Yeah, I can do it. I'll totally do it. It sounds amazing. So with that in mind, have an excellent night. This was a long boy, but it needed to be. This book more than deserves it. Holy shit, it needed it. And as for next week, who knows what the fuck we'll do? No, seriously, I don't know what the fuck we're gonna do. What do you guys think?
We could do We could do that. We could do the Succession War stuff. Another thought, if we want to move away from BattleTech, what was the book I was just reading a little bit ago? Hold on.
Quick.
We can go back to Glorantha.
We could. Oh yeah, because the new Lunar Empire book came out.
The Lunar Empire book came out finally.
If
thank God.
If that Alma Mater Hunter book comes out, might be able to review that.
For World of Darkness, there's Charnel Houses of Europe, the Showa. We've sort of danced around it.
Yeah, we could. There is also an outside one that I was actually going to make a shit post on because it's been requested.
Okay.
The Essentials 20 My Little Pony game.
Oh no.
Yeah.
I may not want to, but that sounds like an entertaining shit show, and I'd rather do that than the Thirsty Swords lesbian expansion that also came out.
I mean, we
I'd rather scoop my eyes out with a melon baller than read that fucking thing.
We liked one setting from Thirsty Sword Lesbians because it was weird jazz punk sword fighting.
Yeah, the second one
has a couple other sort of.
The second one has a setting where you play as hyenas.
Oh God!
If you remember what female hyenas are like, I will leave that up to you.
And let's cut it off here before he explains the purposes of. And no.